Welcome everyone to the council meeting for the 30th of November 2021, which I now declare open. And very excitedly, we're also welcoming a small number from the community who are joining us in the public gallery for tonight's meeting. It's obviously been a soft opening, but everyone is welcome to attend. However, our meetings will remain online for those of you who still wish to enjoy the council meeting online. So I extend a warm welcome to all of you that are joining us this evening, whether it's online or in person. So before I begin, I would like to respectfully acknowledge the land on which we're meeting, that of the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation. And I'd like to pay my respect to their elders past, present and emerging. And I'd also like to extend this respect to any other Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islanders that may be watching online tonight or with us in the audience. Councillors, item 3 on the agenda is apologies and leave of absence, and it looks like we have a full suite. So I will move on to confirmation of minutes. Councillors, can I please have a mover and seconder that the minutes from the council meeting held on Tuesday, the 16th of November be confirmed? Move Councillor Sypak, second Councillor Tyson. I will put that to the vote. All those in favour? And that is carried unanimously. Councillors, I will now ask if the councillor has a conflict of interest on any item on the agenda this evening. Councillor Sharp.
Yes, Madam Mayor, I have a conflict with item 10.4, response to notice of motion growth in tennis plan. My husband's cousin is an office bearer of a local tennis club, so hence my decision to declare a conflict.
Thank you, Councillor Sharp. Noted. Would any other councillor like to declare a conflict on any item on the agenda tonight?
No, but I would like to just make a brief statement, if I may.
Absolutely, Councillor Isa.
I'd just like to make a brief statement that in 2017 I made a submission to the Standing Advisory Committee for the Flemington Estate Development. I also appeared at the hearing. I don't have a private interest in the matter and so don't believe I've got a general or material conflict of interest, but I'm conscious that my previous submission and writing on the matter may give rise to a perception of bias. Council is no longer the responsible authority for the site and does not have any statutory planning approval authority for the site, but I do want to take an abundance of caution and will absent myself from the vote so as not to taint the decision in any way. Thanks, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Isa. Now, under item 17.3 of our governance rules, I'm just going to swap around the agenda slightly and I'll come back to item 6 shortly. So we'll move on to item 7 on the agenda, which is petitions and joint letters. I understand we have one joint letter to be presented this evening.
Mayor, I do have one joint letter.
Thank you, Councillor Isa.
Do I move the recommendation first, or I would just like to, am I able to read the joint letter?
Yes, that's fine, as long as there's a motion at the end.
Yep, so I'll just read the joint letter and then read the motion. Thank you. The letter reads, on behalf of the Flemington Estate resident community, we are advocating and requesting from you that the car park closure on Tuesday the 30th of November 2021 to be paused until consultation with the affected community to identify practical options. We object to the new car parking policy of the one car park for each family. Councillor Isa, we want the council to take into consideration the number of cars each family has and where they will park. For instance, each family due to the new policy is assigned one car park bay for the family which would not be suitable. For example, a family of 4 or more, a husband and wife plus their children who have 2 cars or more, and due to the new policy they will only be able to be offered one car park. Councillor Isa, we're in between 2 main roads, Racecourse Road and Mount Alexander Road, and there is nowhere to park. We would appreciate it if Council can assist us with the issue of the car park closure and check the proposal for the design of the new parking policy by recording the number of vehicles per household. If this policy is not suspended, Council will be causing great hardship, uncertainty and likely financial burden to our community following an already very, very challenging year. We ask that you suspend the policy until 15th of February and consult with community representatives. This would help the families who are in the public housing estate to feel well represented and to be included in the Council's plans. Kind regards, and there's a list of 8 or so residents of the Flemington estate.
Just move. Is there a motion?
Yep. Just move that Council resolves to receive and note the joint letter regarding Flemington Estate Car Park B, refer this matter to the Director of Enabling Services for investigation and inform councillors of the outcome, and C, advise the lead joint letter organiser accordingly.
Thank you, Councillor Isa. And do I have a seconder for that motion? Councillor Hodgson. And I will put that to the vote. All those in favour? And that is carried unanimously. Item 8 on the agenda is public question time, and we have received 2 questions from the community for tonight's meeting. As we do not have the submitter of the questions in the public gallery tonight, I propose that we move to suspend the provisions in our governance rules requiring the questioners to be present in the gallery. That will enable me to read the questions that have been submitted in advance and for the CEO to read the responses. Councillor, may I please have a mover that Council resolves to temporarily suspend the public question provisions in its governance rules to allow questions from the gallery to be read by the Mayor and response read out by the CEO for this meeting. Moved Councillor Sypek, seconded Councillor Tyson. Put that to the vote. All those in favour? That is carried unanimously. Okay. So the 2 questions put to Council this evening come from Peter Robinson. Thank you, Peter, for your questions. Peter's first question reads, the Council budgeted $100,000 to advocate for an Airport West train station and contacted all local politicians and relevant government departments over this matter. Did the Council ever get a clear answer as to why there will be no train station constructed at Airport West, and what is the reasoning behind this decision? I'll now pass to the CEO for a response. Thank you, Helen Swee.
Thank you, Peter. Through the Mayor, there has been no decision made by the state government not to proceed with the Western Gateway train station at Airport West as part of the construction of the Airport Rail Link and Suburban Rail Loop. Council continues to advocate for a Western Gateway station to service the communities of Airport West and Kilo East, and we feel positively about the progress our campaign has made to date. The most recent stage of community engagement undertaken by Rail Projects Victoria specifically referenced consideration for an additional station between Sunshine and the airport, forming part of the planning and design process. The proposed design of the route safeguards the possibility of a station at our desired location by providing a straight stretch of track. Our conversations with representatives at other levels of government continue to be positive, and we regularly engage with Minister for Public Transport and Member for Niddrie, the Honourable Ben Carroll MP, who has publicly stated his support for the project. We will continue to advocate to fill the public transport black hole in the northwest of our municipality, and have proposed that the Western Gateway Station campaign will feature in our new Advocacy Strategy 2022-25, which is scheduled for adoption by Council in December. Thank you.
Thank you, Helen Swee, for the response to that. I do have a second question from Peter, and the second question reads, the new Keilor East Aquatic Centre does not allow swimmers to dive into the swimming pools. Signs are displayed throughout this centre forbidding diving, even in the deep ends of the pool. Why is this so? And again, I will pass to the CEO, Helen Swee, for a response.
Thank you, Peter. Through the Mayor, the new Keilor East Nature Centre outdoor 50-metre and indoor 25-metre pool depth will allow diving for permitted activities in accordance with the Royal Life Saving Society Australia guidelines for safe pool operations, based on the following 3 permitted diving at public facilities activities. 1. Diving under instruction. 2. Diving during competition. And 3. Diving during recreational swimming or informal swimming by public patrons and not under instruction. As the major use of the centre's swimming pools is recreational, that no diving signs displayed throughout the centre are intended to discourage diving by recreational swimmers in water that is not deep enough to do so safely. Effectively, This is everywhere other than at the deep end of the 50-meter outdoor pool, which is 1.8 meter in depth. It is also a requirement to display the no diving signs to meet the required guidelines for safe pool operations, and was a clear directive following Life Saving Victoria's signage audit prior to the centre's opening. The location and positioning of the low diving signs throughout the centre and at the deep end of the 50-meter pool have been amended and now fully comply. There are no longer no diving signs at the deep end of the outdoor 50-meter pool, with the exception of the diving blocks. As no recreational swimming diving is permissible from the diving blocks, the low diving signs will remain on the diving block covers and will only be removed when diving under instruction or during competition. Thank you.
Thank you, CEO. Hopefully, Peter, that answers your questions. Thank you for both of them that were submitted tonight. Now, item 9 on the agenda is reports from delegated committees, and we don't have any tonight. So as I mentioned before, we did skip over item 6. So we'll go back to item 6 before we move on to the reports. Councillors, I'll ask if there's any presentations for tonight. Councillor Nation.
Thank you, Councillor Byrne. I wasn't going to say something, but given we've got 3 members of the gallery, I just did want to note that about a week and a half ago, there was, from my memory, the largest LGBTIQA+ event held in Moonee Valley. I've lived here for 17 or so years, and I've had to think back of all the LGBTIQA+ events that have run in this city, and I can't think of a bigger event. One of the disappointing things was that it took a private entity to run the event, but I definitely think the Lot Beer Garden should be commended, because a really inclusive outdoor festival or event was had, and hopefully it's a catalyst for more events. We don't have too many events over here on the west side, and particularly in Moonee Valley, other than a few midsummer activations. So given the boys are in the gallery tonight, just wanted to say well done on the first, hopefully, of many events, and as a council we do really appreciate any events that cater for people from all walks of lives that may not have regular events to attend. So well done, boys, and look forward to the next one.
And that claps for the boys, Councillor Nation, not for you, but it was a great speech as well. We obviously do pride ourselves on being an inclusive municipality, so it is great that whilst it was done by the private sector, sometimes private entities do things really well. We obviously do have a great midsummer program as well, but obviously always willing to grow and learn and get better in this space. Now, does any other councillor have any presentations that they'd wish to make tonight? No? In that case, I'll move on to the next presentation, which I've got one. As some of you may be aware, Moonee Valley City Council is taking part in the 16 Days of Activism campaign to help end gender-based violence and promote gender equity. Last Thursday, we lit up the Clock Tower orange and raised flags on the Keilor Buller Road junction and the Mount Alexander Road junction to highlight the significance of this cause. The 16 Days of Activism campaign runs from the 25th of November, which is the International Day for the Elimination of Violence Against Women, to the 10th of December, International Human Rights Day. And this year's theme is Respect Women, Call It Out. Gender-based violence affects many of our residents, which is why we are acting to address this through our social and community services to ensure people feel safe in Moonee Valley. With the COVID-19 pandemic having a significant impact on the gender inequality and increased the risk of gender-based violence, this campaign is more important than ever. We are calling on the entire community to join us in promoting, advancing, and championing the human rights of women and girls. Anyone can get involved by taking the time to reflect about improving equality for women and girls in Moonee Valley, or taking part in one of the programs or activities Council is supporting. Now, if you look across the chamber tonight, we've got every single person in the chamber tonight wearing orange. And if someone had have told me when I started off this mayoralty year that I would in fact be stripping in the chamber, I probably wouldn't believe them. But I will take off the robes for this occasion because I do have orange on, because I think it is important to raise awareness for 16 days of activism. So I'll pass the chains and the robe. Thank you. Thank you. And I do hope that over the next 16 days, people do wear orange, and obviously have a look online to see what else you can do to support this amazing cause. So you can visit the website mvcc.vic.gov.au/16 days for further information. Okay, councillors, we'll hit back onto the agenda, which is, we are up to item 10, which is Homes Victoria Flemington Housing Estate Redevelopment MVCC submission. Councillors, do I have a motion? Councillor Hodgson.
Thanks, Mayor. I'd like to move the officer's recommendation with an additional point C, which I'll read. Point C, instruct the Mayor to, within a day, refer item 7.1 Flemington Estate Car Park joint letter tabled at council meeting on 30th of November 2021 to the Minister for Housing as the responsible Minister, Minister for Energy, Environment and Climate Change as the responsible authority, and the local member for Essendon as the elected representative, requesting they consult with community representatives on the concerns raised and the impacts of changes to Flemington Estate car parking conditions.
Thank you, Councillor Hodgson. And do I have a seconder for that motion? Councillor Tyson. Councillor Hodgson, would you like to speak to the motion?
Thank you, Mayor. So this report brings a submission that has been prepared by our officers in response to the development plan and applications for stage 1 of the Flemington Housing Estate redevelopment, which has been submitted by Homes Victoria to the Minister for Energy, Environment and Climate Change. So Council in this instance aren't the responsible authority for the application or decisions being made, and the planning overlay does require that the development overlay is prepared in consultation with Moonee Valley City Council, and as the Council we're also invited to make a submission commenting on the applications for the first stage of this housing development. So while the responsible authority is the state government, the submission that officers have worked on I think really highlights how important it is that as council we provide comment on the development, because we know and understand the community and the local environment. And a couple of key points in the submission that demonstrate that I think are council's noted and recommended that a drainage master plan for the site is delivered, because down where the Flemington Estate is, it's down on that river flat, that the Moonee Creek. And there are drainage issues down there that perhaps haven't been fully picked up in the application. So I think that's a really important one. Provision of open space for new and returning residents as a part of the first stage of delivery is one of the things we're asking for. Officers have noted some traffic and parking concerns, landscaping and urban design options that might manage some of the topography there, and maximising that use as a pedestrian realm for people of all abilities. The submission also notes our tree canopy target and asks for large canopy trees to be planted wherever possible, which is a really great recommendation as well. There are other aspects of the design that councillors and officers have discussed, including the mix of dwelling types. The stage 1 does deliver 1, 2, 3 and 4 bedroom apartments. And I'm really hopeful that Homes Victoria research has landed on the right formula here to deliver for the really high demand that we know exists for public housing in inner Melbourne. Moonee Valley does have one of the highest demands of local government areas, with waiting lists at really ridiculous numbers. It's really important that we see this investment in public housing and that it meets the needs into the future. To the additional point C that I've added there, we were contacted by residents, and Councillor Isa read out the joint letter just before, who live in the housing estate properties and are concerned that the changes to parking conditions that are coming into effect from today, that mean that residents are only eligible to apply for 1 parking permit, and some of the families living on the estates, this will create really significant difficulties. So I thank councillors for voting to accept the joint letter, but because the issue is quite urgent with the impacts likely to be felt from as early as tomorrow, I think it's necessary in this case to take immediate action to refer these concerns to the Minister for Housing, who has responsibility for the estate, as well as our local member for Essendon, who works really closely with our community on local issues, and the Minister for Energy, Environment and Climate Change, who in this instance is the decision-making authority. As I mentioned, we're not the responsible authority for this land at the moment, and so we don't manage the parking conditions and granting of permits, but we do play a role in assisting our community, and by referring this letter I hope that we can advocate for what the residents are asking for, which is for state government leaders to reach out and speak to them and work through the concerns and issues raised. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Hodgson. Councillor Tyson.
Thanks, Mayor. I think Councillor Hodgson summed it up very well, but I think it's interesting to note that obviously this project and this renewal is 4 or 5 years old, but it actually ends up representing the state government's gigantic public housing build, and this will really be one of the first cabs off the rank in terms of completion. I think there's going to be a lot needed over the next decade, 5 decades, 10 decades, but I know at some point I read that Moonee Valley was, I think, 56th out of 78 councils in Victoria in terms of public housing referenced against needs. So this is really critical as a project, and council adds so much to this in terms of having that local knowledge on the ground.
Thank you, Councillor Tyson. Would any other councillor like to speak on this item? Councillor Nation? Councillor Nation.
Thanks, Mayor. Look, I'm not going to support this motion for one key fundamental reason, and that is, Councillor Tyson, you've referenced gigantic public housing bill. The reality is the commitment by the state government is 1,000 new public housing units by 2022. As of June 2020, the Victorian public housing waiting list was 99,264 people. So if this project was delivering more dwellings or more habitable rooms in public housing, then I would probably be supportive. And yes, I know that we're just, this isn't our project and we're just providing our recommendations through the report. But as I've raised on multiple occasions, the number of habitable rooms in the old walk-ups that have been knocked down is 486 bedrooms. After all that's done as part of this big build, the number of habitable bedrooms is 407. Now, yes, there's an increase in 50 dwellings, but that doesn't mean much if you're actually reducing by 79 the number of bedrooms. So if the government and if this project genuinely wanted to increase public housing stock, particularly here in Moonee Valley, then the focus should be on delivering public housing, not complementing it with private dwellings. And yes, they're affordable housing and they'll deliver below market rental properties, but still, this is meant to be the big build. Statewide, there's 99,264 people on the Victorian public housing waiting list, and that's as of June 2020, and we're actually reducing the number, the state government's actually reducing the number of habitable bedrooms. There was a parliamentary committee report that was tabled in early 2020, and it found that Victoria spends less per capita on social housing than any other jurisdiction, and the government would need to construct or purchase an additional 100,000 new public housing dwellings by 2030 or deliver 10,000 a year to meet that demand. They're delivering 1,000 over 4 years and are actually reducing the stock in terms of habitable bedrooms here in Moonee Valley. In terms of the waiting list, for priority access, the wait is 11.6 months, and that's for priority access, so people who are experiencing homelessness, escaping family violence or living with a disability. This project's not a big build. It should deliver more for the most vulnerable residents. Thanks, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Nation. Is there any other councillor who wanted to speak on this item? Councillor Bedio.
Thanks, Mayor. I'll be brief. Very much echo Councillor Nation's statements, and for that reason I can't support this motion. I also just want to flag my disappointment that the state government has essentially taken away all delegation from us in these decisions, and I can't help but feel there's some element of political games that are being played with this. As Councillor Tyson said, we provide so many supports, so many services for the people that live in these towers. We're the ones that are on the ground, and I believe we weren't consulted enough on this. And yeah, I just want to flag that I'm utterly disappointed in the state government, and I won't be supporting this motion.
Thank you, Councillor Bedio. Would any other councillor like to speak on this item? Councillor Hodgson, would you like to close?
Thanks, Mayor. Look, obviously I'm very disappointed that Councillor Nation and Councillor Bedio don't feel that they can support this. Obviously we need more public housing. This does deliver something for our community that, as I say, I really hope that Homes Victoria, who has provided us with information about the research that they undertook into where the highest demand is coming from on the waiting list, and it is from their research in 1 and 2 bedroom houses, hence the design that they have submitted. So they're looking at providing for some of the larger families, and we do have larger families living in our housing estate, particularly because, you know, predominantly the dwelling mix was predominantly 3-bedroom houses in the existing estate, so that it is a change. But it will, according to their research, meet the needs of the growing demand in particularly 1 and 2 bedroom housing. So we're looking to the future here. I wish that there were more houses. More housing in public housing. I hope that this will meet the needs of our future demand in public housing, and that future residents of the apartments will enjoy being a part of our community.
Thank you, Councillor Hodgson. I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? That is Councillor Tyson, Councillor Sharp, Councillor Adams, Councillor Hodgson, Councillor Byrne. All those against? That is Councillor Sypet, Councillor Nation, Councillor Bettio. That motion is carried. We'll now move on to item 10.2 on the agenda, which is the Moonee Ponds Creek Naturalisation Project Funding Contribution. Councillors, do I have a motion? Councillor Adams.
Thanks, Mayor. I'd like to move the officer's recommendation, please.
Thank you, Councillor Adams. And do I have a seconder? Councillor Nation. Councillor Adams, would you like to speak to the motion?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. In early 2022, Melbourne Water will commence a government-funded project to naturalise a section of the Moonee Ponds Creek in Strathmore. Along with Moreland Council and other relevant stakeholders, Moonee Valley has very much been involved in the project planning with Melbourne Water, and it is something that Council has been advocating for a long time. The Moonee Ponds Creek chain of ponds has been a really successful community project, bringing together all the stakeholders involved for a collaborative initiative to improve the creek for our environment and community to enjoy. There is a need to improve existing council infrastructure, and these complementary open space improvements alongside the channel works for assets that belong to council has been costed by Melbourne Water, and that is what we are being asked to support in principle for the 22-23 financial year, subject to the 22-23 budgeting process. The funding requested is for the design and delivery of the following: a shared concrete pathway realignment and upgrade, Brosnan Crescent, Margaret Street bridge replacement, which is actually a shared cost with Moreland Council, new gravel pathway, 2 quiet zones with seating, artwork, lighting to bridge entrances, a drink fountain and signage. This project will absolutely transform this section of Moonee Ponds Creek and has generated so much excitement and anticipation in our community, and the concept design images are wonderful. We have the fortune to create a more natural creek channel and a surrounding open space that maximises the natural beauty of this environment and access to the creek. I really love these collaborative groups and would like to see more of these partnerships and initiatives explored. To have improvements to our open spaces delivered on behalf of council leverages scale, management efficiencies and costs. It is estimated that we will save $200,000 if we take up this opportunity. We are so lucky in Moonee Valley to have this absolutely beautiful natural asset in our municipality, and there is a real commitment by the group to transform the creek into an iconic waterway for Melbourne. I would really like to see this project delivered to our community who love and appreciate our beautiful Moonee Ponds Creek as a complete upgrade, not delivered in parts. These are the type of projects our open space reserve is intended for, and this project aligns beautifully with our MV 2040 Beautiful and Green themes, and so happy to support this recommendation. Thanks, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Adams. Councillor Nation.
Thank you, Mayor. Happy to second this motion. I do have some reservations which won't stop me from seconding it, but I guess those reservations are based around council having to pick up the tab for projects where there's big announcements and everyone goes down and has the photo op, and then at the end of the day there's a call on us to complete the funding of the project, and a considerable call at that. I'm not saying the project's not worthy, not warranted, because I think Moonee Ponds Creek is a real jewel in our city, and I actually hadn't appreciated Moonee Ponds Creek as much until I changed wards and we went for a walk up there, the 3 ward councillors, and it's a really lovely asset that runs all the way through to the Gowan Brae wetlands and beyond, right through to the city of Hume. So the actual naturalisation of the current concrete channel is really important. It's really important for the area, really important for both flora and fauna and native flora and fauna that either grow or reside around the river. My hesitation is solely around the fact that there's a call on council, and if this, a 5 kilometre stretch of concrete channel, and this is the first, 100 metres? First 500 metres of 5 odd kilometres, and overall price tag about 7.5 million. So you can see how the spend to naturalise all of that concrete channel is going to be a considerable project, and if there's another stretch of 500 metres or further, the council won't always be able to chip in to fund that shortfall. But yeah, as I said, happy to second. I think it's an exciting project. The more people that get down along the creek, the better, because it's a lovely asset. And let's hope that this is the first part of the naturalisation, but the only part we've got to put in, dip into our pockets to help with that shortfall. Thanks, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Nation. Any other councillor like to speak on this? Councillor Sypak.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. As I can see, this is a good project. I'm just a little perturbed that, like Councillor Nation said, that we have to chip in, a good sum of money for this. But what concerns me is Steeles Creek. It's always forgotten, Steeles Creek, and we've got our own little concrete skate park running through AJ Davis Reserve, and I really would like to see City West Water and have this project repeated in the Rosehill ward with Steeles Creek. So, Madam Mayor, like I said, I'm in 2 frames of mind. I just always feel like the upper end of our city is always neglected, and I think I will not be supporting this until I see Steeles Creek get a mention as well.
Thank you, Councillor Sypak. So, okay. Thank you, Councillor Sypak. Any other councillor like to speak on this one? Councillor Hodgson.
Thanks, Mayor. Look, I too would love to see this project replicated all along Moonee Ponds Creek and Steele Creek. I think the Chain of Ponds project, which we're very committed to as a city, is it's a really exciting project, and it is one that will only be delivered if we're working in partnership. And there's some really advantageous aspects of working in partnership with Melbourne Water, with state government, and with our neighbouring municipalities as well as friends groups. So I think this is one of the first projects, I think, to come to us of this scale. I'm really pleased to be contributing to this project, and I want to see this continued. There are, by being a part of the project and collaborating on it, we're actually achieving something of significant community value, community benefit, and at a more efficient value. So there's cost savings in doing it in this by this method as well. So I'm really supportive of this motion. I'm really excited to see it replicated over in Rose Hill Ward, down in Moonee Ward, across our city. I think it'll be really great to renaturalise all of our waterways and deliver something really great, connecting pedestrian, cycling, decreasing the environmental impact of human behaviour, and returning a more vibrant and diverse ecosystem to the area.
Thank you, Councillor Hodgson. Would any other councillor like to speak on this item? Councillor Reiser.
Thanks, Mayor. Advocacy can be a worn-out word at council. We advocate or argue about what we're going to advocate for constantly. Importantly, nearly all advocacy projects involve a funding partnership between council and the target of our requests. We ask for financial support for dreams we have but can't afford, and then we pull our funding weight as best we can. We make our own financial commitment as part of our advocacy pitch. This partnership approach has been no different in the case of the Moonee Creek Naturalization project. In 2019, Council urged people to sign a petition to lobby for federal funds for the project, spruiking the project in the media, calling it an exciting project that we're committed to. And again in 2020, when we said on our website, Council's excited to support a funding announcement of $5 million from the state government to help transform a section of the creek to improve the waterway biodiversity and create a more natural creek. For the past 4 years, Moonee Valley Council has been advocating to revitalise the Strathmore section of the Moonee Creek, and part of this has been a commitment to funding our share as part of the collaboration. We've been very proud of our role in the chain of ponds collaboration, signing an MOU in 2019 with Moreland, Melbourne Water, Hume, City of Melbourne, Parks Victoria, Friends of Moonee Creek and more. Our recently approved council plan has as item B 1.1 in the 2021 to 22 initiatives commence the naturalisation of Moonee Creek in collaboration with key partners and stakeholders. The MOU commits us to taking a collaborative approach to plan and work together to restore the creek, enhance biodiversity and capitalise on opportunities to find lasting solutions together. While the MOU doesn't oblige us to commit any funding, our credibility and integrity are at stake. If we've gone cap in hand to ask for the funding provided for this project, if we've said in public multiple times through our mayors and other spokespeople that we look forward to working with stakeholders to deliver this exciting vision, then this is the moment for us to prove that and to show ourselves to be team players. Our contribution will fund open space assets that are council, not Melbourne Water assets, and that are part of the concept design developed through community consultation. Everything except the shared path can be funded through the Open Space Reserve. Working together minimises resourcing impacts on council officers to undertake detailed design consultation and asset delivery. Provides best value to council, saving an estimated $200,000. A decision not to commit to funding the open space assets would restrict construction scope for the naturalisation of the channel and compromise the interface between the creek and landscaped surrounds. Plenty of Moonee Creek in Moonee Ward to explore and improve, and I look forward to it being improved as well over the many years ahead. What's at stake in this decision is not just the health of a vital waterway, but Moonee Valley's credibility in advocacy.
Thank you, Councillor Reiser. Would any other councillor like to speak on this motion? No. Councillor Adams, would you like to close?
Thanks, Mayor, and thanks, Councillor Isa, for those comments. I totally agree. And the fact is, if we have the scope changed and the longer that we delay this, the more costly it will become. And it makes absolute sense that while the shovel is in the ground, we get the project completed in its entirety and make a real commitment to transform and beautify this waterway. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Adams. I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? That is Councillor Tyson, Councillor Sharp, Councillor Nation, Councillor Adams, Councillor Bedio, Councillor Hodgson, Councillor Isa, Councillor Byrne. All those against? Councillor Sypek. That motion is carried. Probably worth noting, it is a very, very big project within our municipality. It's not, it's definitely significant. It's not like it's done by a handyman. It's obviously a lot of people will be chipping in to be doing it, so we look forward to it finally, hopefully, starting. I'll move on to item 10.4 on the agenda, which is response to notice of motion growth in tennis plan. No, apologies, I skipped a page. Item 10.3, which is the interim cover, I was getting a bit excited there, interim canopy cover targets for the City of Moonee Valley. Councillors, do I have a motion? Councillor Isa.
Mayor, I have an alternative motion to the officer's recommendation, which I'll just read, if I may. Part A stays the same. Part B reads, adopt a minimum interim canopy cover target for the municipality of 22% by 2030. And Part C reads, note the strategic work and planning required to meet this target and request the Chief Executive Officer to bring a report to Council during 2022 that outlines Council's strategies to achieve the 30% canopy cover by 2040 and the interim target.
Thank you, Councillor Isa. Can everybody see the screen and is aware what's being moved? Yep. Do I have a seconder for this motion? Councillor Sypek. Councillor Isa, would you like to speak to the motion?
Thanks, Mayor. This report responds to a really important motion that that asked Council to set an interim canopy target to ensure that we're on track to meet the 2040 target. The report, in fact, vindicates the necessity of examining this question. What the report demonstrates is that business as usual tree planting in Moonee Valley will not, in fact, meet our 2040 tree canopy target. We would only get to 23% by 2040, 7% short of our target of the 30% canopy cover. The report sets out an interim target of 22% by 2030 to make sure that we then reach our later target of 30% in the 10 years that follow that. Now, over the 10 years from 2009, we only had an increase in tree canopy cover of 3%. This rate needs to be more than doubled if we're to meet our interim and our full targets. So this report is critical in that Council's now setting incremental targets to help us increase this rate. What this report doesn't do is set out exactly how we're going to achieve this, hence the additional point in the motion. There are some suggestions provided in the report, but I know community members and other councillors are also interested in understanding what we can do to plant more trees over the next 8 years. The report includes suggestions such as the use of mechanisms under the planning scheme and local laws, engagement and education with the community, and the acceleration of the street tree planting program. Say that fast. So the amendment to the officer's recommendation has in mind that officers may flesh these out further and potentially add further important considerations such as how to address the inequities across the municipality of canopy percentages, and the appropriate choice of tree species to support resilient ecosystems and reduce urban heat. We know why a strong target's so important. Urban heat brings climate and health risks to people and to our ecosystems. So part of the work that is integral to the implementation and achievement of this target relates to the cycle of climate change, urban heat and resilience. Climate change puts our trees and ecosystems under stress, and we have to accommodate this as well in our plans for tree species and tree planting. Tree choice helps us create better ecosystems and deal with urban heat island effect. We can also more specifically address neighbourhoods that are lower in tree coverage, such as Airport West, and that as a result suffer from localised hotspots. Tree inequality exists in Moonee Valley, and we can plan our tree planting to address this through targeting areas in greater need. We have 12,000 vacant street tree plots in 2021, and we need to double our schedule of 1,700 trees per year. In setting out the costs of this accelerated tree planting program, we can also acknowledge the savings that we make by increasing our tree canopy. The economic, ecological and health benefit of cooling our community through increased canopy can be factored into our thinking about costs, although this isn't part of our current accounting. We can also factor in the importance of increased tree canopy to our climate goals and our emissions targets. This is an important step in cooling our community.
Thank you, Councillor Isa. Councillor Sypek.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm happy to support this this item, and the reason why is I also too believe that canopy increases good climate and good sort of environments. Today I drove through the city of Boroondara, and they have some magnificent streets through there, and I actually had to stop in one of the streets and just take a breath and have a look at what the wonderful trees that they've got there. And I can see that Moonee Valley is going in the right direction, and hopefully, you know, for our future generations, they're going to have that same kind of atmosphere with the wonderful tree planting. A few years, well, I want to also mention our officers. They are doing a magnificent job about with the infill trees. Like if you drive around in our suburbs, have you seen how many new beautiful trees have been planted? Fantastic job. So I take my hat off to the CEO and your staff for doing such a great job here. And I can personally say that because a few years back, I had a wonderful Melaleuca tree out the front of my house, and by the act of God, it got blown over in the winds a few years back. And I've got a very, very wide frontage. And the other day, guess what? Not only did I get one tree, I got two trees. So I am doing my part for the city of Moonee Valley with two trees out the front of my place, and I will nurture and take care of it, and I make that promise to yourself, Mayor, to the CEO, that those trees will not go unloved. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Sypek. You always put a smile on my dial. Okay, and I did note, Councillor Adams, you gave Councillor Sypek a round of applause, so well done for having your two trees on the nature strip. That's fantastic. Now, get back onto it. Oh, thank you, Councillor Sypek. Would any other councillor like to speak on this? Councillor Adams.
Good to see that you're making your personal contribution to the tree canopies in Moonee Valley, Councillor Sypek. I think it's great to have big, ambitious goals. Obviously, we have to be realistic so that our goals are achievable, and I think the 30% target for canopy coverage in 2040, while ambitious, is definitely achievable. I think it's always good to have interim targets so that you can track progress, and officers have advised that the 22% is feasible and achievable, and so happy to support this motion. Interestingly, one of the biggest barriers to achieving these targets is the requirement to significantly increase the number of trees in the private realm, which makes up around 59% of land in Moonee Valley. I'm interested in learning more about what measures need to be taken and how council officers will implement strategies for this to be realistically achieved, given that private properties are not within our control. And we know that if we do continue with the status quo and leave it up to private owners, we probably won't achieve these targets. So happy with the addition to point C, Councillor Isa. Thank you for bringing that to the officer's recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Adams. Councillor Bedio.
Thank you, Mayor. Echoing Councillor Adams' comments, we're doing a fantastic job as a council, and I really commend our officers for their work in ramping up the rollout of tree coverage, but we can't do it alone. Be like Councillor Sypek, go out, plant trees in your backyard. It doesn't take a handyman, anyone can do it. Get out there, plant some trees this weekend, and do your bit to increase our canopy coverage.
Thank you. Councillor Bedio, did you say handyman or handywoman, perhaps?
Or handywoman, yes.
Thank you, Councillor Bedio. Councillor Hodgson.
Thanks, Mayor. I just wanted to add my support to the motion and to what my fellow councillors have been saying. I think one of the key things that the report really highlights is that we really do need the community to come along with us on this journey, and I'm really glad that officers have identified that and have identified a willingness to try and work with the community on strategies that will be able to proactively achieve this target, because we can't do it alone. There are some, we've had councillor discussions that are really creative and exciting, I think, and I really look forward to the report that comes back about this. particularly, and I know Councillor Isa mentioned speaking about particular tree types, because we might be able to, you know, as well as increasing the canopy in the valley, we will also be able to potentially create wildlife corridors. And if we get people planting similar species, you know, we can achieve a few things with the same sort of strategy. So that's really exciting. And I'm really looking forward to, one of the other things to note is that the part of it is that, you know, you can plant trees, if we plant trees close to 2030, they're not going to have big canopies. So we really do need to get started on this work now. Obviously, they've measured that a target of 22% by 2030 will mean that those trees will hopefully continue to grow, as well as, you know, planting additional trees. But we do need to get moving now to make sure that trees will be large enough to provide the sort of protection and canopy that we're looking for.
Thank you, Councillor Hodgson. Any other councillor like to speak on this? Councillor Sharp.
Thank you, Mayor. Just quickly, I'm certainly happy to support the interim targets. Obviously, when we decided to endorse the canopy cover a few years ago at 2040, we were looking ahead, and obviously things change over time, so certainly happy to have some sort of interim target. I do note that in roughly 1.14 and a few of the sections there talk about how we're going to do it. So I'm not entirely, well, getting a report back next year for me doesn't entirely sit all that well, because I think that this report details how we can do it. Obviously tonight we're seeing that the target for 2030 will be 22%, so our officers, I'm sure, have a handle on how we can achieve that, and the limitations and opportunities that will be presented to us, which is pretty much in this report. So I'm not sure at this stage, well, at the moment I'm probably sitting with not supporting this motion, because I don't think we need a report next year. I think that's just a waste of our officers' time, and obviously they're probably, I have no doubt, quite under the pump as at the moment, and that probably will not be slowing down in the near future. So I just want to see the targets achieved. They know what they're doing. Happy to leave it at that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Sharp. Any other councillor like to speak on this motion? Councillor Nation.
Thank you, Mayor, and I'm contemplating an amendment, and I might just flesh out reasons why, and then potentially then flag one. And it's got to do with point B, particularly that 22% interim target, because, you know, with all due respect to the organisation, if I hear that something's achievable and realistic, then I don't think we're aiming high enough. So, look, I'm contemplating whether or not that 22%, yes, it's achievable and realistic, but if it's a target, do we aim bigger, and do we aim for 25%? Do we aim for 30%? You look at what Hobson's Bay are doing. Now, Hobson's Bay actually have a 30% by 2040 target, same as us. But in terms of their investment in what they're putting into their urban forest strategy, I think it's an extra 200,000 in terms of plantings. They've got project managers, specific project managers. They've got specific resources dedicated in the planning department to look at planning scheme reform. They've got extra funding for arborists to look at the health of current trees. There's a whole range over 5 different objectives. And I know that comes at an extra cost to council, but I think another urban forest strategy to look at is the City of Melbourne 2014 to 2023, where they actually outline the economic benefits from investing in a higher canopy cover, and they source Chicago as an example where there were considerable economic benefits from increasing canopy cover. So I think I'm going to move an amendment to delete in point B the number 22 and replace it with the number 25.
Thank you, Councillor Nation. Do I have a seconder for that? Councillor Bedio. Councillor Nation, would you like to speak to the amendment?
Yeah, and look, I guess I fleshed it out in my...
Sorry, Mayor. Could I just ask a point of clarification to the CEO, please? Sorry, Councillor Nation, to interrupt. CEO, I was just wondering what the impact of, let's say, what was the percentage that you said?
On from 22 to 25.
25, so 3% increase. Can I ask what the financial impact of that would be on the budget, please?
Mindful, Councillor Adams, that this obviously is an amendment. CEO, are you comfortable with answering that, or is that something that, as it's an amendment, you don't have the details on?
I don't have details, so I'm not aware if officers have done work on this, so cannot advise. Thank you.
Thank you. So sorry, Councillor Adams, obviously because it wasn't what was in the report, we can't give you that answer at this stage. Is that okay for your point of clarification?
Look, yeah,
Councillor Nation.
Councillor Adams, I just feel that if it's a target, then we should be aiming a little higher than what's achievable and realistic. And as I said, with all due respect to officers, if this is a priority for us as councillors, and we see both net community and potentially economic benefit in increasing the canopy cover of our city, then I think we should aim a little bit higher than what's achievable and realistic. Have I just plucked an arbitrary figure out of my head? Yes. I would have liked 30 there, but 30 is by 2040. Point C, and I know we're speaking to the specific amendment, but I'd just point that point C does relate to point B, so how we get there will be picked up in some of what point C is outlined in point C. So I just think we should aim big. Everyone's spoken with passion, or most of us spoken with passion around the chambers about the importance of canopy cover. I think there's really good research that other councils have done. And again, I cite that Hobson's Bay example of investments a lot more than just allocating extra $900,000 to plant trees. It's that bigger picture. Councillors, you may or may not wish to support, but I say aim big. It's a target. We mightn't get there, but you know what, 22% achievable and realistic, we'll get there. Let's aim big. If we aim for 25% and we only get 24 or 23, so be it.
Thank you, Councillor Nation. Councillor Bedio, if you'd like to speak on the amendment.
Thanks, Mayor. Yes, echo Councillor Nation's comments. Let's go big. The reality is, and feel free to correct me if I'm wrong, councillors, but the total land within Moonee Valley, the total remit of land that we actually have control over planting doesn't even equal close to 30%, I believe. So the reality is, even if we field all the land that we have control over, we're not going to hit these targets. The reality is, I understand there might be concerns around budget requirements, but we need the private realm to chip in and help us. So I don't necessarily think this needs to be about what our officers need to do, and I understand it might be a stress on officers, but this needs to be a shared target between us and the community. So it's not only up to us to achieve this target, it's up to the wider Moonee Valley community, and getting homeowners and the private sector involved is going to be critical. I think a nice round number like 25 sounds a lot nicer as well, so more than happy to support this amendment.
Thank you, Councillor Bedio. Would anybody else like to speak on the amendment? Councillor Isa.
Yeah, I'm happy to make it 30% by, 2030 if you want. That's fine. But it's going to come at a cost. And so when we get to budget time and when we're asked to commit the amount of money that's needed for planting trees, I hope that the people who wanted to see this as strong as we'd love to see it are also willing to put the dollars behind it. So happy to make it as strong as other councillors are willing to make it. Yes, great. But we just have to be willing to put the funds behind that.
Thank you, Councillor Isa. Anybody else for the amendment? Councillor Adams.
Thanks, Mayor. Yeah, and I agree, Councillor Isa, and it's the reason that I asked about the financial impact on our budget. I'm happy to support 25% as well, but it will come as at a cost, and it actually surprises me how expensive it is to plant trees. As Councillor Bedio also said, it's not just about council planting trees, it's about increasing their plantings in our private realm, which is going to take a lot of effort, I guess, on our part to encourage our private owners to plant more trees so that we can meet our targets, because the reality is without that we're not going to reach our targets anyway. But happy to support Councillor Nation's ambitious goal of 25%. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Adams. Anybody else like to speak on the amendment? Councillor Sypak.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and I thank Councillor Nation for his amendment. And yes, you are right, 25%, 30%, yeah, they're all great targets, but if we do put in the 30% and we only reach 24%, it's still a win. If we reach 15%, it's still a win. If we reach 1% more canopy, it's still a win. So I don't think it's what the targets we set, it's where we finish is the most important thing here, Madam Mayor. So when it comes time to budget, I'm sure that we're going to be ruthless in our budgetary understanding of what we can and what we can't do. And if our budget only allows us 22%, well, that's 22% more canopy increase. So I'm not worried about where we start and what our targets are. I'm worried about where we finish at the end of these 4 years.
Thank you, Councillor Sypak. Would anybody else like to speak on the amendment? No. Councillor Nation, would you like to close?
Thanks, Mayor. And look, I do note that, yes, I've said I've picked, just plucked a figure 25 out of the thin air, but it's not picking a number for the sake of the number. It's picking a number that, if that's our target, then we attempt to achieve that target. So if the concern is that in budget time that we're going to, if this gets up, renege on that commitment, I don't think that is the case. And I've already flagged, obviously, the Hobson's Bay example, where there's an extra $200,000 of planting, but particularly that investment in reviewing planning policies, reporting frameworks, stat planning instruments to facilitate increased canopy cover. So at current, with that 22% target, the report talks about that expenditure of $1.8 million up from $900,000 to help achieve that figure. But it's not just all about us planting more trees. Councillor Bedio referenced that I think it's 40% of land is council land, 40% is private, and then 20% is public assets like nature strips. So it's not just about us planting more trees on our land and spending more and more dollars to plant trees. It's about looking at other ways to encourage our residents to plant trees. It's looking at reviewing our planning scheme. So yes, there's a financial cost, and there will be an increased financial cost, and I'm happy to wear that and support that. And I won't have time to, but again, I just urge my colleagues to read the City of Melbourne Urban Forest Strategy 2014 to 2023, because it actually references the economic benefits from increasing canopy cover, be it reducing energy costs, increasing property values, avoiding costs of infrastructure damage and renewal, decreasing health costs, marketing the city, and storing and sequestering carbon. And that Chicago example, from just a 17.2% canopy cover, storing $14.8 million carbon, sequesters carbon at a value of $521,000 per year, filters air pollution at $6 million, has a structural value of $2.3 billion. So it's not just about the raw cost. Let's look at the bigger picture: net community, environmental, and economic benefit in the long term for our city. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Nation. So I will put just the amendment to the vote. All those in favour? And that amendment is carried. So we'll move back to the substantive. Councillor Nation, you were speaking before you moved that amendment, and we'll put, we had about 1 minute to go on the clock if you would like to continue on the substantive.
Shouldn't have rushed that last 20 seconds plus the extra 10 seconds you gave me. Thanks, Mayor. Look, as I said, I think achievable and realistic is not where we want to be if our real aim is increasing this canopy cover, hitting that 30% by 2040 target, which hopefully then, if we're changing our interim target, we might ultimately review that number, which is currently in MV 2040, and aim higher. and I just think that the importance that this has for our city, particularly noting that reality is that the environment's warming, so we need to ensure that the West is not an island out by itself. You look at those canopy cover and the heat maps and you see how exposed the West is. Yes, we're inner West, but still our coverage is a lot lower than out in the East or the suburbs that I think, I don't remember if it's Councillor Sypek or who referenced what they've got out in the East. I also would flag that at was it Planning Melbourne, Councillor Eisenman, I know she was online, that Planning Melbourne workshop, the West's interim targets were lower than the East and lower than the South East, and it's like, well, why? Just because we've I've got 3:40 on the clock there.
Councillor Nation.
Just because we're starting behind, it doesn't mean we have to finish behind, and that's really important. The West is starting behind, but we can finish on par or finish in front, and if we're not actually leading that as a council, then we can't expect the community to pick.
Thank you, Councillor Nation. I'm mindful the clock was a little bit generous for you on that extra minute. Now, so we're back to the substantive. So Councillor Adams, Councillor Bedio, Councillor Hodgson, Councillor Nation, Councillor Isa, Councillor Sypek, and Councillor Sharp have spoken on the substantive. Councillor Tyson, would you like to speak on the substantive? No. In that case, Councillor Nation, would you like the microphone again? Because as the mover of amendment, you are allowed to close.
Look, I won't. I will just say that, as Councillor Isa reiterated, putting your hand up for the numbers is important. Let's actually have a look at how we get there. Point C will be the first part of that, and being able to see how we can map out that interim target and that eventual target. Do I get more time?
No.
Thank you. As Councillor Isa mentioned, it's not just putting our hand up for an amendment, it's actually putting our money where our mouths are. And as I said, there's a whole range of things that we can do. I really think we need to invest in looking at amendments to our planning scheme. I think for the 40% of land that's privately owned, sometimes giving people a little bit more than a nudge in terms of ensuring that they increase their canopy on their property is really important. So yes, look, I think we've done well to put our hands up here and aim a little bit higher, but the important thing is that we follow through with that. So I look forward to the report that's outlined in Part C, and would like to think that amongst our councils in the West, by setting an interim target that is higher than what we'd originally flagged, we might be leading the way in the West, or at least on par with Hobson's Bay. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Nation. I'll grab that 40 seconds back, and I think you're about even. And Councillor Isa, as the original mover, would you like to close?
Yeah, I would, thank you. It's actually 60%. So 60% of Moonee Valley is private. So obviously, we often get this tension between what can we achieve as the council and what do we have to then put mechanisms in place for to help the community achieve, and there's going to be a lot of that in this particular effort, and of course the planning scheme and local laws and other mechanisms, whether we can learn from other councils. That's always, I think, we always need to be looking at what other councils are doing. City of Melbourne has been working on this for many years, and we can learn a lot from them. So I would hope that the report that comes back in Part C does pick up on some of the things that Councillor Nation spoke to tonight, as well as the things that are in the report and what other councils are doing. If I can just really quickly speak also to that point, though, that was made about planting trees in private property. It's not just a matter of going and getting the shovel, going to Bunnings and sticking a tree in the ground. There's a lot more factors involved in choosing trees. So I would encourage, if people are inspired by tonight, to go and plant as many trees as they can in their garden, to get a little bit of advice, do some reading, work out where you're planting your trees, what kind you're planting. They need to be resilient, they need to be appropriate for the structures around, and just to put that important point in there. One final point, if I may, Mayor, a lot's been said, I'll just try and race through this. those targets that Councillor Nation spoke to, I have on my screen in front of me, and I can just point out that the target for the West for 2030 is only 9%. So we will be champions of the West if we achieve this. Interestingly, though, and if I can just have a few more seconds to just deal with this.
You have an extra 30 seconds,
Thank you.
Councillor
The
Isa.
target for the eastern region is 27% for 2030, inner southeast 24, southern 21. So we're setting a high bar for ourselves, which is great. I didn't suggest it because I didn't think it would get support. So if someone else suggests it and it's got support, I am going home happy. That is wonderful. I don't think that the officers' time will be wasted in putting together that report for point C, and I eagerly await it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Isa.
Mayor, sorry. Could I ask a point of clarification through you to Councillor Sypek?
You can ask a point of clarification. I can direct it.
I was wondering if Councillor Sypek will be changing his planting trees because of his change in motion.
Oh, no.
And has he considered the breed of tree?
Under no circumstances
No.
will I be changing. I've got two lovely gum trees that have been planted by the council, and with the wonderful work of the officers.
Councillors.
But I would also like to have my own point of clarification.
No,
to
well, I
Councillor
haven't
Isa.
actually. Councillor Sypek, please. Councillor Nation. Sorry, not Councillor Nation. Sorry, Councillor Nation's laughing in the corner. Councillor Tyson, did that answer your point of clarification? Okay, Councillor, can we just please stick to where we are? Councillor Sypek, is this actually a point of clarification?
Well, why wouldn't it be?
I'm just making sure, but that's okay. Off you go.
Just a point of clarification to Councillor Isa.
Please ask the point of clarification through me as the chair. Thank you, Councillor Sypek.
The Mayor, I'd like to ask a point of clarification through you to Councillor Isa when she mentioned about tree planting and picking the right species for the backyard. Please don't plant a Melaleuca tree.
No, councillors, please. We're actually in the council chamber. I was actually going to commend councillors on how well we've been doing so far in the chamber, but I don't actually believe that was a point of clarification, so I'm not going to accept it. And no, councillors, I will be putting it to the vote. So all those in favour. That is Councillor Tyson, Councillor Sypek, Councillor Nation, Councillor Adams, Councillor Bedio, Councillor Hodgson, Councillor Isa, Councillor Byrne. All those against, that is Councillor Sharp. That motion is carried. I suppose on something like this, we've got to look at not necessarily the cost of what it costs us to put the trees in, but the cost on us in the future if we don't put them in. And as I was mentioning, I was about to give everyone a really good rap about how well we've been performing in the chamber and how well researched you all were as councillors in this debate, because I could actually see, and I know we've got smiles on our face, but realistically everyone seemed to have done a lot of work in that, and so I do applaud you as councillors for putting in the time to research those your speeches, and I think the community would really appreciate that. So thank you all for putting the time and effort into that debate. Moving on now, we will move on to item 10.4. Councillor Sharp has previously in this meeting declared a conflict of interest in it, so she has stepped out of the chamber. So item 10.4 on the agenda is response to notice of motion 2021/24 Growth in Tennis Plan 2018. Councillors, do I have a motion? Councillor Tyson.
I'll move the officer's recommendation.
Thank you, Councillor Tyson. And do I have a seconder? Councillor Hodgson. Councillor Tyson, would you like to speak?
Thank you, Mayor. I'm really pleased to support this as a former tennis player, very, very terrible former tennis player. But look, I think what we're looking at here is really important in terms of the future of the city. I note in the report there was a point that I think if we don't build 89 courts by 2040, I believe, we're falling behind in terms of our capacity right now. Sorry?
Councillor Tyson, I believe that is how many courts we need in total, not in addition.
Okay, thank you. But look, regardless, tennis is a growing sport. As terrible as I was in my sporting career, I'm very pleased to support this item. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Tyson. Councillor Hodgson.
Thanks, Mayor. This report comes back to us in response to a notice of motion from August of this year, just seeking an update on the tennis plan, and I think it really highlights the value of, we do produce these plans, whether they're for sporting groups or, other community programs and activities, to have periodic review of them, and there are a few things that have become a bit outdated, some wins to celebrate that we have achieved and ticked off some of the 11 of the projects. But it is good to make sure that we're still aware of the plans that we have produced and to see how we're tracking against them, speaking of targets. So was really great reading, and I'm glad to see that there are a few updates to be made, and pleased to support this.
Thank you. Councillor Hodgson. Would any other councillor like to speak on this motion? Councillor Isa?
Yeah, look, this does provide a really good snapshot update, and that's, thank you for bringing the notice of motion earlier in the year to prompt this, because I think it is really important that we get updates like this to see how different plans are tracking. I'm not entirely sure whether it has helped us resolve some of the issues that arose perhaps during the Riverside discussion around the Ascot Vale Tennis Club, and I think that there's still some uncertainty about how different clubs might operate now and into the future, and how those arrangements around leases or booking courts will actually be resolved. So while this is a useful update, I would have also valued it delving further perhaps than the notice of motion even did. So it's not I'm not reflecting on the officers not meeting the intent of the office of notice of motion, but I think there's still perhaps some outstanding work that exists around us really working out how best to support clubs and equal access and resolve some of those issues that arose. So perhaps there's another way that we can seek some updates on how we can best serve the community with respect to some equity across our tennis clubs.
Thank you, Councillor Isa. Would anybody else like to speak on this motion? Councillor Sypek.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm not going to put in an amendment or anything, but I'd just like to highlight to our officers that not only do we have great tennis courts here that are kept up to date, but we also have a lot of tennis courts that are not in very, very good condition. And, I think it'd be first to have a look at some of the clubs that need a lot of work done to their tennis courts. Some have still got bitumen on them, some have still got their fences are falling over. I'm just trying to highlight to our officers in the report to have a look at what we've got existing. We've also got primary schools that have got fully fenced tennis courts. So I think as we were looking for sporting ovals like soccer pitches and football pitches, we are now starting to look at some of the state schools and some of the private schools. But also, we should be all looking at also at the tennis courts. And I can just bring one up, is St Peter's in East Keilor. They've got about 6 tennis courts there with just a little bit of TLC. The East Keilor Tennis Club used to play there, but because the courts became sort of unusable, they had to amalgamate and join Airport West. So let's look internally first before we start to try and figure out where we're going to put new tennis courts, because we have got tennis courts in the city that could be fixed up with a little bit of TLC.
Thank you, Councillor Sypek. Would any other Councillor Adams?
Thanks, Mayor. And following on from Councillor Sypek's comments, I'll just note that we are actually upgrading one of our only walk-up tennis courts down at Montgomery Park. So I think in this budget we've got about $200,000 to upgrade and resurface the walk-up tennis courts at Montgomery Park. So that's really exciting. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Adams. Any other councillor? No. Councillor Tyson, would you like to close?
I think Councillor Sypek makes a good point as well, and we visited Airport West Tennis Club not too long ago with yourself, Mayor, and the local MP and the Minister for Sport. I'd really like to see an upgrade there as well. We'll see what happens over the next few years, but I agree we also need to be looking at our current infrastructure.
Okay. Thank you, Councillor Tyson, and I will put that to the vote. All those in favour? And that is carried unanimously. We'll just wait a moment while someone goes and gets Councillor Sharp back into the room. Whilst we're doing that, yes, we do have some really exciting, as Councillor Adams mentioned, some really exciting tennis projects with Montgomery Park due for completion. Just tennis courts, walk-up tennis courts, not multi-lined. Hopefully,
And you
in the
don't
new
have to
year.
book either.
And you don't have to book either, so it'll be very exciting for all of the residents of Moonee Valley. And it looks like Councillor Nation's getting a bit excited. Is that were you just practising your skills there, Councillor Nation?
In terms of my tennis game, I was particularly bad at the backhand, I think, but I was okay with the serve.
All right, councillors, I'm sure that people would love to know how good or bad we are at tennis. However, we do have Councillor Sharp back in the chamber now, so we will move on. So item 10.5 on the agenda is the CEO Employment and Remuneration Policy. Councillors, do I have a motion? Councillor Tyson.
I'll move the officer's recommendation.
Thank you, Councillor Tyson, and a seconder. Councillor Isa. Councillor Tyson, would you like to speak?
Thanks, Mayor. Not too many eager hands towards the end of the agenda, but this is part of the policy that we have to do new as part of the new Local Government Act. We've worked with our lawyers. We've all met together to discuss it, essentially outlining the process for the CEO and future CEOs after and into the future, detailing processes, yearly reviews and the like.
Thank you, Councillor Tyson. Councillor Isa.
I apologise, Councillor Tyson. I didn't mean to move this one, but was distracted at the time. I was thinking about my own bad tennis skills. I can't play tennis at all. So, but yeah, look, this is a really important document because employing the CEO and then conducting the annual performance reviews is one of the most important tasks that we undertake as a council. And I do note that in sort of working on this particular policy, because it is a policy that we're required to have under the new Local Government Act, we have crafted this policy to reflect some of our own preferred positions, and particularly that all councillors will be involved in the committee that will be engaged in the employment and then the performance review of the CEO. And I think that's really excellent that all 9 of us and councillors into the future, that the whole team be involved, because it as I say, it's one of the most important decisions that we make, and we rely so much on our CEO. If we don't have a good performing CEO, we can't deliver for the community the things that we would like to see and that we've undertaken and committed to delivering. So it's a solid policy that will help us, and it does also involve input from independent experts who can guide us in that, because it's possibly something that many of us don't do in our day jobs, employ CEOs of organisations of this size, and so that independent guidance that we can receive is really invaluable to making sure that we can make choices and then monitor the performance of the CEO. And I'm sorry to be speaking about the CEO in the third person, and of course she's just to my left, but we do really value our CEO, and we value the work that you do. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Isa. Would any other councillor like to speak on this item? Councillor Sopek.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm happy to support this, and I'll tell you, look, it's not just only about the CEO, but it's also about the team that she's put together. This shows confidence in the CEO, and this shows confidence in her officers right down through the whole system. I think we've got a great council going through here. So for me, this is a vote of confidence. This is a vote of Moonee Valley's moving in the right direction, and I'm happy to support this item.
Thank you, Councillor Sypek. Would any other councillor like to speak on this item? Councillor Tyson, would you like to close?
I certainly want to echo what Councillor Isa said, and I didn't mean to talk about our CEO as if she wasn't in the room, sitting 6 places away from me, and very pleased to be working with you and hope to continue that well into the future.
Thank you, Councillor Tyson. I will put that to the vote. All those in favour? That is carried unanimously. Not sure whether I meant to say something on that, CEO. You're right, still sitting in the chamber after that. Okay, moving on to item 10.6, which is the governance report. Councillors, do I have a motion? Oh, there's a fight for that one. Councillor Hodgson.
Thanks, Mayor. I'd like to move the officer's recommendation.
Thank you, Councillor Hodgson. And a seconder? Councillor Isa. Councillor Hodgson, would you like to speak on the motion?
Just really briefly, Mayor, this one is a periodic report that we receive to record the informal meetings of councillors that occur in accordance with our adopted governance rules. So they're predominantly our strategic briefings that happen on the off Tuesdays from council meetings, but yeah, there's a few others in there, and this is just to support good governance and transparency for the community.
Thank you, Councillor Hodgson. And Councillor Isa? No. Would any other councillor like to speak on this item? No. As no one else spoke, I will put that to the vote. All those in favour? That is carried unanimously. Councillors, we are now up to notices of motion, and we do have a few on the agenda for tonight. So item 11.1, I call on Councillor Nation to present his first notice of motion titled Notice of Motion 2021/31, Improvements to Albion Street Pedestrian Crossing at Montgomery Park, Essendon.
Thank you, Mayor. I move that Council resolves to review possible safety improvements to the Albion Street Pedestrian Crossing at Montgomery Park, Essendon.
Thank you, Councillor Nation. And do I have a seconder? Councillor Sharp. Councillor Nation, would you like to speak on the item?
Yes, I will, Mayor, and obviously it's been a while since I've had the ability to move notice of motions, and I do apologise for being listed on the agenda and trying to get some things in before the end of the financial year. So, look, this notice of motion is to review the pedestrian crossing on Albion Street, which connects Montgomery Park to south of Montgomery Park, which is Essendon or Moonee Ponds at that point. I think the border is actually Buckley, so it's still Essendon. I earlier in the week actually sent around a video to councillors which just shows the particular crossing and why members of the community have raised the issue with this crossing to me. Albion Street's a bit of a cut through from the city of Moreland, West Brunswick, to the city of Moonee Valley, Essendon. It also runs in an east-west alignment, being that connection between the two cities. And as such, at dusk or dawn, you do get also the sun that motorists have to contend with, in addition to the fact that people tend to be crossing the cities and obviously going from point A to point B. There are a number of safety improvements that could be reviewed, and I have deliberately not asked for a report to come back to council. So I guess this is, in essence, just flagging this with the organisation, with officers to review, and if they see there are improvements, they can then work out what to do from there. I think it's important to come through chambers, obviously, as well, rather than just telling them what to do. A couple of the ideas that could potentially be looked at. A lot of our pedestrian crossings these days have a raised hump. The pedestrian crossing that's at Wilson Street out the front of Moonee Ponds Primary School there. It is Moonee Ponds. Moonee Ponds Primary School was something that we implemented in a LATAM probably in my first term of council, much to the disappointment of the bus companies who complained about it. But it does give that little physical barrier, potentially not for the first time through, but for subsequent movements through. There's also options with signage and lighting as well. So when you're travelling eastbound, the lights are actually obscured by a tree. You don't see the lights until you're probably about 10 metres away from the crossing. The sign that says, for some reason, slow trucks is actually behind the crossing, so once you travel through. So look, there's hopefully safety improvements that officers can consider. They may have to come through the budget process depending on how big they are, but I just thought it really important to move it because obviously Councillor Ava Adams spoke about the investment to Montgomery Park and the tennis courts, which are actually right there, and every time I'll post something, whether it's me looking stupid on an officer's, a director's BMX bike, celebrating a pop-up pump track, or playing very poor tennis in a video and letting it bounce twice to celebrate the tennis courts resurfacing. I keep getting told there's no point you fixing these things, there's no point you investing in these things if people can't actually safely walk to the park. So, councillors, hopefully you support this notice of motion, and at very least, hopefully, I can say to those individuals that reside around the park that yes, we're investing in the park, and you can safely, hopefully in the future, safely cross Albion Street to get to the park. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Nation. Councillor Sharp.
Thank you, Mayor. This crossing was actually installed probably about 10, 12 years ago, I think from memory, and it was installed because of community requests and community agitation in that area at the time. So I know it's certainly been an area that's been, well, it's always problematic with cars down there and pedestrian movements. And when we did install the crossing after such involvement from the community, it was certainly welcome at the time, but obviously we can always relook at things to improve safety, and I don't think we've probably looked at the crossing and how it's actually operating for a number of years now, so certainly happy to support that. Like Councillor Nation said, we're improving the park, so we certainly need to improve access to it. And it is a difficult location there on Albion, especially after just coming around the corner. So yeah, let's see what we can get moving down there. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Sharp. Any other councillor? Councillor Adams.
Thanks, Mayor. And thanks to Councillor Nation for bringing this nom. The pedestrian crossing on Albion Street is a really important crossing, providing accessibility between the traffic school and Montgomery Park on one side of Albion Street and the Moonee Creek Trail access way on the other side. Like Councillor Nation, I've received and also personally witnessed safety hazards for our younger bike riders and pedestrians, and so welcome any improvements to this crossing to make it safer for our community to use. The connectivity between Moonee Creek Trail and Montgomery Park has been made even more important with our recent inclusions in this year's capital works for major upgrades that Councillor Nation just mentioned, to the and also to upgrades to the bike jumps at Fanny Street Reserve and installation of a pump track at Montgomery Park, which will obviously make that area a little bit busier. And so this important precinct for our teens is already very busy. Albion Street is very busy, and so any safety upgrades here for our bike riders and pedestrians, which I know will have increased traffic following these exciting upgrades, is welcomed. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Adams. Would any other councillor? Councillor Sypek.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Yes, I will support this notice of motion, as long as we get a promise from Council Nation to not post any more of those photographs. You will have my full support on this one, so we don't have to expose the city to some of these photographs of yours. So would you agree to that, Council Nation?
Look, if that's a point of clarification, I will agree to that.
Thank you, Councillor Sypek. Councillor Sypek.
That was the start of mine.
That's all you wish to say?
No, I've still got 2 minutes.
Oh, you still want to go? Sorry.
No, look, on a serious note, yeah, look, I was there when there was the original agitation towards this, and there was a lot of community backing for this. And the points that Council Nation makes for the adjustments and some of the, maybe to upgrade this is fully compliant. I was there also today to have a look at this, And yes, I totally agree. I'm fully in support of it. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Sypek. Any other councillor wish to speak on this item? Councillor Isa.
I did go down there today. It's not on any of my familiar routes, so I did make an effort to drive past and just understand the crossing. And it's clear that there are some trees that could do with a prune as you're coming eastwards. The trees there block off the flashing lights or the signage on the left-hand side of the road. One of the things about pedestrian crossings that really puzzles me is that they are painted white. And I've spoken about this with officers before, and I understand that it's regulations and it's out of our hands, but it would make much more sense to me if the actual zebra crossings were not zebra crossings but were tiger crossings or something yellow or some other colour that actually stood out, because there's lots of white lines on roads often, whether it's bike lanes or other things, and the white lines of the zebra crossing often seem to get lost, particularly in the wrong sunlight. So I'd really love to see us exploring options for making the actual stripes more visible. One of the other things that I drove along Macaulay Road yesterday, there's a crossing that's really badly placed just prior to the Macaulay train station if you're travelling away from the city. And again, there's a lot going on. It's very visually busy, and you've got the train boom lights, and yet the pedestrian crossing there is really quite visible, and the way that they've managed to position the signs just is right in direct eye line for a driver. The other thing that they've got on the road there, rather than sort of the zigzags or the cat's eyes, they've actually got it's like a cattle grid type. I mean, it's not a cattle grid, but it has that, it makes that vibration as you just drive towards the crossing. And again, it just makes you sort of notice what's going on and keep your eye on people that might be popping out in front of you. So I would be interested to see if there are some new and some new thinking that can be brought to our pedestrian crossings in Albion Street and elsewhere across the municipality. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Isa. Would any other councillor like to speak on this motion? Councillor Nation, would you like to close?
I will, just briefly, and yeah, Councillor Isa, the white zigzag as you approach pedestrian crossing is not probably the most informative thing that a pedestrian crossing is coming up. It just looks like there's extra lines on the road, and this particular pedestrian crossing as well, it has light posts that illuminate the crossing at night, which is actually probably when it's most visible. So there is the existing poles. Now, I don't know if you can put the flashing lights actually up on the pole so it's over the road so you can see it, but that's what we'll get the officers to do. It is a bus route, so there may need to be conversations that are had with the bus company, although as I gave that example in Wilson Street, we ended up going ahead with that regardless of the feedback of the bus company. So I note this isn't the only pedestrian crossing that probably needs work. Talking about disguising pedestrian crossings, there's one in Napier Street, Strathmore, where the posts are painted green, which is a whole other story, but they're completely obscured. But for the purpose of this, hopefully councillors see fit to support this, and then we'll leave it with the officers to see if there is a solution that works.
Thank you, Councillor Nation. I will put that to the vote. All those in favour? That is carried unanimously. And I call on you again, Councillor Nation, to present your second notice of motion number 2021/32, improvements around Glenbervie Station, Essendon.
Thank you, Mayor. So I move that Council resolves to A, write to and work with VicTrack to connect Council's newly installed pedestrian crossings on Napier Crescent to Glenbervie Station to ensure proper and disability compliant pedestrian access. B, review improvements to pedestrian access in the vicinity of Glenbervie Station, including 1, potential paving of the dirt track from Glenbervie Station to the Napier Crescent Railway Bridge and from the Napier Crescent Railway Bridge to the Grice Crescent Pedestrian Bridge, in brackets noting this is VicTrack land and may need to be done in conjunction with VicTrack. And 2, potential improvements to the Blind Corner pedestrian crossing on the northern side of the Napier Street, Napier Crescent roundabout, and other footpaths / pedestrian improvements in the immediate vicinity.
Thank you, Councillor Nation. And do I have a seconder for that? It's really hard having two Buckley Ward councillors on the opposite side. I sort of have split vision. Councillor Adams. Councillor Nation, would you like to speak?
Thank you, Mayor, and I do promise that it's not only pedestrian crossings that residents contact me about, but these are two matters that I've said I would raise in chambers. Look, this is a bit of a different case to the previous item because we have invested recently through one of our local area traffic management programs to whiz-bang pedestrian crossings on Napier Crescent near Glenbervie Station. Now these you can well and truly see. There's flashing lights, there's refuge islands. They're well marked, they're well lit, and came at decent investment to council as well. Now, look, the main problem, and what I'm raising in point A, and again I did send a video through to councillors for their reference to see exactly what I mean in point A, is we've got this brand new pedestrian crossing. It's got its tactile surfaces, it's got its refuge island. You connect through to Glenbervie Station. Where council land stops and Vic Track land starts, where you come out of the pedestrian crossing, it's into the Glenbervie Station car park, which is a very long oblong shape, and then there is a constant row of parked cars in front of you. Not a gap at all. So if you have a pram or if you have got accessibility issues, if every car park is used, there actually is not a clear path through to the station, which obviously council, investing in these pedestrian crossings, did everything that we were required to do, but potentially there wasn't that conversation had with Vic Track saying, we've invested in this infrastructure, let's actually connect it through to the station. There is a little path, well, it's not a path, it's the overflow of a disabled parking bay, which is required, which, mind you, is quite somewhat down the car park, which again doesn't really make sense because it should be as close as possible to the station access. But unfortunately, in that swing-out bay for that disability car park, there's only one swing-out bay on the non-driver's side when you pull in, which is another issue, but there's a payphone there. So not only do you not have the swing-out for the door, but you can't go through because there's a payphone. So point A, look, will hopefully just give officers the capacity, the ability to speak to Vic Track, to have a look at completing that connection. Point B is having a look at that larger parcel of land to the south of Glenbervie Station, which we actually as a council opposed extra car parking in, and I'm really glad that in the last council term we didn't agree to giving up that green space. It was slated by Vic Track to be a car park when they were working on the Buckley Street level crossing and did some car park installation in the Mount Alexander Road median strip to the north of Buckley Street. So we fought against that and we kept it as green space, and council has been involved with planting 100 plus saplings in that area. But if we can look at trying to increase that connectivity and actually really appreciate that parcel of land, plant it out even more. I do know that there is a newly formed stationeers group at Glenbervie, which is fantastic. They want to look at removing some of the weeds that aren't native and looking at how they, with council support and Vic Track support, can plant out around Glenbervie Station. So the rest is pretty self-explanatory. Again, points 1 and 2 might not go anywhere, but it's just giving officers the idea to explore. And again, report not needed, just giving a bit of hopefully guidance to officers to see if something can transpire. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Nation. Councillor Adams.
Thanks, Mayor. And thanks, Councillor Nation, for bringing this NOM. You spoke very comprehensively to it, so I don't really have much more to add other than that this whole area is needing some attention and safety improvements must be looked at. So I'm really looking forward to seeing some improvements eventuate. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Adams. Any other councillors to speak on this one? Councillor Sharp.
Thank you, Mayor. I think point A with the newly installed pedestrian crossings on Napier Street leading to pretty much nowhere is a no-brainer. So thank you very much, Councillor Nation. I don't frequent this train station very often, so I wasn't even aware that it happened, so thank you. And point B, yep, the dirt track from the station along that little area there is quite well worn, so people use it. But point B, the pedestrian crossing on that corner of Napier Street it seems to work, but it's a crazy place to sort of, I suppose, A, have a crossing, and B, how it operates sort of well now, but you know, I'm certainly happy to look at other or any improvements that can be made, because school time in that little pocket is absolutely insane, basically. There's no real other word for it. So, yeah, certainly happy to support this NOM and see where it goes. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Sharp. Any other councillor? Councillor Nation, would you like to close? I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? That is carried unanimously. Councillor Nation, I'm going to call on you again for your third notice of motion. Notice of motion number 2021-33, review of land purchases made by Council's Land Acquisition Committee.
Thank you, Mayor. So I move that Council resolves to bring a report back to Council in early 2022 detailing A, land purchases made by Council's Land Acquisition Committee during the previous term of Council, B, updated advice in regards to whether the use of Council's open space reserve was appropriate for the purchases listed in A, C, any proposed short and long-term plans for sites purchased as per Part A that are currently not being used as public open space or that don't have immediate plans and committed funds to be used as public open space, and D, possible disposal options for the site at 605 to 625 Mount Alexander Road, Moonee Ponds, the site at 45 Fisher Parade, Ascot Vale, and the site at 344 Ascot Vale Road, Moonee Ponds.
Thank you, Councillor Nation. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Sharp. Councillor Nation, would you like to speak on that one?
Look, I will, and the notice of motion is somewhat pretty self-explanatory, and I just would preface anything I say by noting that the minutes of the Land Acquisition Committee are confidential, so I'll speak less, I guess, to the substance of this motion, so not to implicate myself or Council by breaching confidentiality. Council's got an open space reserve. It's a capacity. It's an ability for us to collect payments from developers through planning applications and ultimately realise those funds to create or improve open space. During the previous term of Council, there was a Land Acquisition Committee that was created for a short period to look at using some of those funds to purchase sites. As picked up in point D, one of those sites was 605 to 625 Mount Alexander Road, Moonee Ponds. My questions arising through this notice of motion is, are we actually using that site for open space? Does it adhere to how open space reserves should be used? And does Council have a long-term vision for how we would actually realise that site that site as genuine public open space? Similarly, the site that was acquired at 45 Fisher Parade, Ascot Vale, at the moment that was obviously acquired through Open Space Reserve as part of the publicly published charter of the Land Acquisition Committee. Anyone who's been down to Fisher Parade would note that site's been boarded up for 2 years, and as a council we don't have any short or long-term plans to realise that site as open space, noting there is a PAO, but still, even if that was realised, potentially there isn't a use for this to be public open space. The site at 344 Ascot Vale Road, Moonee Ponds, is one property in from Junction Lane. During the previous council term, we kicked Latitude, fantastic service, out of that site, and it's laid empty since. It was maybe 3 or 4 years ago. Yeah, so I would like to see that reviewed as well. Possible disposal options doesn't mean that we're committing to sell these sites, but it's about looking at, are these sites genuine uses for public open space, or if not, is there a better way of realising or investing in open space in our city? I'll leave it there. Thanks, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Nation. Councillor Sharp.
Thank you, Mayor. I'll be brief because, as it was mentioned, the Land Acquisition Committee committee meeting minutes are confidential, but I was a member of the Land Acquisition Committee, and we always had very thorough discussions and full understandings of what was put before us as options to either purchase or generally purchase. I didn't always vote for the purchases that we subsequently did, so I'm certainly happy to see point D and look at some options for, or disposal options for some of those sites listed there. The open space reserve is another issue that, you know, as a council group or as a council, I think we've been grappling with over the last number of years, particularly in regards to its definition and its how it's has been used in the past. So, yeah, looking forward to seeing what B says in regards to the open space reserve. But no, this is a, I think this is a good motion. We always need to be able to, you know, we might buy something then realise that, oh, maybe, you know, maybe money could be better well spent elsewhere, and we don't actually have any long or short-term plans for the site. So we need to be able to manoeuvre ourselves and recognise that and review decisions that have been made. So I wholeheartedly support it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Sharp. Any other councillor like to speak on this item? Councillor Isa.
Thanks very much, Mayor. Thank you for bringing this motion, Councillor Nation. I don't know, is that a soundtrack for me to sing to or something? This is something that has troubled me all year, and partly I get a lot of resident, a couple of these are in, well, all three of them are in Moonee ward, and I do regularly get questions about the use of, well, two of those sites. And, excuse me, so I have been asking some questions about that, and I do understand that there is a larger body of work that has been going on for some time and continues to go on that will look at sites across the municipality. So I look forward to that coming to us. But as in the interim or as an aside, I support looking at these three specific sites and asking the questions that you've asked. I thank you for doing so. I was trying to work out there whether there was a space in any of those points to reference the open space strategy, because I think that, you know, the open space strategy does some really good work about where we need open space to be purchased. And when you look at a map, Ascot Vale and Moonee Ponds really do lack, apart from the riverside perimeters, they really lack open space in the middle, and some of these sites don't go any way to really filling that gap. As well, we've got MPAC, and MPAC has some aspirations around increased open space, and again, so I was thinking about whether there was a space in any of those to align B perhaps with other strategies and plans. Maybe I'll just think on it while anyone else speaks and see if it's worth doing that. I'm sure that the advice that comes back will touch on those points anyway. If I can just mention 344 Ascot Vale Road, Moonee Ponds. I don't know whether this was bought with open space reserve. I can't recall, but it was bought the junction lane was originally meant to be a whole connector road. And so 344 was bought to buy then the place next door, 346, and to make Junction Lane a way that people could park in the Gladstone Street car park and use venues along Mount Road to stop people from parking behind Mount Road in residential areas at night. So the whole point of buying 344 was we couldn't get through the negotiations on 346. They fell through. It wasn't purchased, and yet that was probably 12 years ago, I think, Councillor Sypek, and it's not been used for that purpose. So I look forward to discussions on that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Isa. Any other councillor like to speak on this? Councillor Sypek.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and I commend Council Nation for bringing this up. It's always good to review what committees we have, how they're structured, and do they serve a purpose in today's council. 4 years ago, when this committee was formed, I believe everyone else took one step back, and Councillor Narelle Sharp and myself were the only ones left standing there. So we were actually put on this committee. But, look, there's,
Councillor Sypek, I actually believe that the terms of reference was to have the mayor and the deputy mayor, and I believe that was when it was formed when Councillor Sharp was the mayor and you were the deputy mayor. So I think perhaps that's why people took a step back, because that was why you were supposed to be on there.
Yes. Yeah. Pardon? Yeah, look, I don't think we've done bad purchasing some of these properties. I don't think we're going to lose money on purchasing these properties. I think, if anything, we're going to be making a nice little healthy little plus value for the city of Moonee Valley if we decide to sell them, if the new committee decides to sell them. I personally would like to keep them. I personally would like to think that they're good value. But, if the will of the council decides we go down a different path, I will not be an obstacle.
Thank you, Councillor Sypek. Any other councillor? Nope. Councillor Nation, would you like to close?
Thank you, Mayor. And look, I think one of the real questions for 605, 625, regardless of whether or not it's considered a strategic site, is if its current use adheres to why or how open space reserve can be used. Because you look at its current use, it's got a micro business in there, Assembly Threads, which is great, a great small business. You've got Latitude, again, a great service which has been moved a couple of times. We're generating income through an advertising billboard with a large marketing company. There is a bit of open space, probably debatable if that's functional open space. So does that adhere to the guidance that we've had about how open space reserves should be spent? And again, the same with 45 Fisher Parade. You couldn't get a less open parcel of land because it's boarded up. It has been. And if a resident asks, as no doubt Councillor Isa has referenced, she has, what do you say? Eventually we're going to put a path down to the river on an incline of 45 degrees or whatever it is. So I think that body of work, particularly through A and B, will give us some guidance as to how to move forward. I would also apologise to the Moonee ward councillors that I've cited 3 parcels of land that are not in my ward. However, they were purchased in the previous term when I was a ward councillor, and as one of the last standing 4 on council, that's obviously my motivation to bring this into the chambers this evening. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Nation. I will put that to the vote. All those in favour? That is Councillor Tyson, Councillor Sypek, Councillor Sharp, Councillor Nation, Councillor Adams, Councillor Bedio, Councillor Hodgson, Councillor Isa, and I am against. That motion is carried. Item 11.4, Councillor Nation, I'm getting very used to saying your name. The 4th notice of motion for you tonight, entitled Notice of Motion number 2021/34 Scout Hall Audit.
Thank you, Mayor. I move that Council resolves to receive a report back to Council in the first 6 months of 2022 that provides an audit of community facilities in Moonee Valley used primarily for scouts and guides, including cubs, venturers, etc. The audit will include information related to participation data, facility use and facility asset condition, and will help form future planning and potential alternative uses for these assets, as well as help guide any future inclusion of scout/guide facilities in Council's master plans. As per the incomplete 2018 review, the audit would include a review of all scout halls and work with scouts to consider their needs moving forward.
Thank you, Councillor Nation. And do I have a seconder for that motion? Councillor Bedio. Councillor Nation, would you like to speak to the motion?
I will, thank you. And Councillor Tyson has recalled his days as a budding tennis player. I myself was involved in Cubs and Scouts. Actually, back in 1997, when they developed the Premier's Award for Scouts, was in the very first group of Scouts throughout Victoria that received that honour, which is now the Australian Scout Medallion. Mother was Barloo at Cubs and then was promoted to Arcala when I was in Scouts. So I'm very well across the scouting system and the important role Scouts play within our community. I think during the last council term, Councillor Sypek, Sharp, Bert and myself were definitely down at a number of different Scout events and would preface any discussion by saying that I believe that they are an extremely important contributor to our community. So this notice of motion is not something that I necessarily wanted to bring to Council. However, it has come to my attention that back in 2018, Council committed to an audit which was going to help guide the future of scouting facilities and consider and review all scout halls and work with scouts to consider their needs moving forward. That's a direct quote from the 2018 commitment. However, since that time, this audit/review has not occurred, and we're stuck in this limbo, particularly with a number of our master plans, where there are parts of these master plans that are contingent on this audit and review, which hasn't happened, and therefore the master plans have stalled. So I cite the Clifton Park Master Plan. Now, the Clifton Park Master Plan notes that it's recommended that a decision to remove the Scout Hall and incorporate within the new pavilion shall not be confirmed until Council has undertaken a review of all Scout Halls and works with Scouts to consider their needs moving forward. This is to be undertaken within the next 2 years. Now, that hasn't happened, and subsequently we're in a little bit of limbo, as I said, at Clifton Park, because the actual long-term capital works plan in the master plan and in MV 2040 Community Facilities Action Plan has a pavilion which incorporates the sporting club, cricket and football, and the Scouts. And you can imagine Scouts need a big hall. I can tell you that from first-hand experience. So by incorporating the Scouts into that pavilion, it increases the floor plan considerably and alters the cost considerably. Now, the review that was meant to be undertaken in 2018 was to see if that was required or if the Scouts were content with their property or exactly whose property it was at Clifton Park, whether or not it was council land and they owned the building, vice versa, what have you, because there was a number of different formats within our city. That hasn't happened, and we don't know, particularly as Buckley Ward councillors, where we go now with that pavilion because the review hasn't happened. And that Clifton Park example is the real impetus of why I brought this into the chambers, because this work needs to be done so we can get a resolution there. I know AJ Davis is similar. So the master plan actually states there's an opportunity to decommission the Scout Den and include this function within the new pavilion. The 5th Keeler Scout Group has shown support for this proposal and have provided their requirements. The concept, design and planning of the pavilion is subject to certain approvals and stakeholder engagement. So again, with AJ Davis at the moment, there is a separate Scout Hall. The aim within the master plan is to combine them, but again, there is a review that would help guide that process. So I just want to reiterate that this is not a a motion that in any way diminishes what Scouts do for our community, the important role they play, and I note that there is a range of different structures when it comes to their facilities. Some they own, some they own the building on council land, and some they have a lease agreement. But if we don't complete this body of work that, with all due respect, is 12, 18 months overdue, then ultimately we're at a little bit of a standstill. And in terms of future master plans that we will be delivering, again, if there's existing scouting facilities, we need to have a bit of guidance in that process to be able to work out the future of these sites. Happy to open it for discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Nation. Councillor Bedio.
Thanks, Mayor, and thanks, Councillor Nation. Well, planning and developing our shared community facilities are a key component of MV 2040 and for facilitating 20-minute neighbourhoods. And if there's work that needs to be done to support our strategic planning around that, then I think we need to get through those hurdles so that we can have robust discussions moving forward. So happy to support this motion.
Thank you, Councillor Bedio. Would anyone else like to speak on this motion? Councillor Isa?
Thanks, Mayor. I think I'll move an amendment, but I'll just speak a little bit first, just to get things in order. I understand that in 2018 there was a resolution to undertake a review of all Scout halls and work with Scouts to consider moving forward, and the reference to this has been added to the resolution, which is good. But it's not clear to me whether this or how this review has proceeded. And this is really the first question that I think needs an answer prior to committing our officers to some further work. What aspects of the review have been completed? What conclusions and discussions have there been to date? And I have further questions about the motion. What's the purpose of the data collection? What will it be used for? Does council own the assets? Because information has been received that put some question marks around that. Does council have the resources to undertake this work? And most importantly to me, what discussions have been undertaken with the Moonee Valley Scouts about this motion or work? I received an email this afternoon from the District Commissioner of Moonee Valley who writes that Scouts Victoria, including our local support structure, the district team and our individual Scout groups, were not aware of this motion until it was brought to our attention by a community member. It comes somewhat as a surprise as we've been working with the facilities team from Moonee Valley City Council. It goes on to say we'd like to continue to work closely with Moonee Valley City Council along any processes, as we're all for the betterment of community. But given that we've not had an opportunity to discuss the review or how it would be conducted, we seek an opportunity to do so prior to any motions being passed. So with that in mind, I'm just going to seek to move an amendment and see if anyone's willing perhaps to second this. And I guess it's to perhaps just roll things towards this incomplete 2018 review and put that as the real starting point and those conversations with the Scouts. So, and I haven't written this down, so I'll just move an amendment and then write it down if need be. So the first sentence as is, and then the audit will then cross out everything until guide any future inclusion. So just crossing out that including, yep, thank you, that's great. So the audit will guide any future inclusion of Scout Guide facilities and council master plans. And as per the incomplete 2018 review, the audit will include a review of all Scout halls and work with Scouts to consider the needs moving forward. I'm hoping someone might be willing to second that, even if for debate.
You can just wait one moment. Governance is just updating it on our screen here, and then once they do that, Councillor Isa, I'll get you to double check just to make sure that, so we've got crossed out the words between will and any, if that's correct, and then...
Will and guide.
Will and guide, sorry.
No, audit will guide.
And then there's a highlighted word, will, well, that was changed from something else. Would to will. Is that correct, what's on the screen at the moment, Councillor Isa?
That's what I'm moving.
Councillors, can I just get a general consensus if people can see what the changes were for that amendment, or if anyone needs it printed out? We've just asked governance if we can just make it a bit bigger on our screens. There's not really, there's more of the deletion.
I've just deleted that the part of the sentence.
Yeah, governance, if we can just keep the strikeout up there that was on there. Councillor Adams, if you wanted to leave your seat and if you wanted to walk around here, if you need to be able to see the screen. For everyone who's watching at home or in our gallery tonight, the first time I've had to say that, obviously we need to make sure that all councillors are very clear in terms of what they're voting on or what they're potentially going to second. So we'll just need to make sure that we've all got some time to get our head around it, around this motion. Councillors, if we're going to be much longer, I'm happy to adjourn the meeting if you can give some sort of an indication. People have been able to see the changes? Okay. Councillor Isa, so you're moving as is what is on the screen as an amendment? Okay, so we've got Councillor Isa moving that amendment. Do I have a seconder for the amendment? Councillor Hodgson.
Thanks, Mayor.
Councillor Isa, would you like to speak to the amendment, please?
So what I'm seeking to do in the amendment is to support the audit and to support that coming back to council via a report, because that's obviously what's caused some frustration here, I think, from what Councillor Nation was saying, that the frustration is that the audit there was a resolution to undertake it in 2018 and there's some lack of completeness or clarity around where that's gone. So supporting bringing back a report to council on that audit in line with the review of all scout halls and, importantly for me, working with scouts to consider the needs moving forward to help scouts to grow. But we're coming out of 2 years of pandemic. Organisations that are still going after this pandemic, you know, all kudos to them. The scouts I know have been running things online, have been getting kids out. So to support, importantly, their needs moving forward, a really important part of that from that original motion. All I'm really doing in this amendment is just suggesting that instead of this adjunct of information around participation data and alternative uses for the assets, I think is what those words, I think, potentially easily misconstrued. If the intention is not to remove scouts from those facilities, I think that's not necessarily captured in those words and has alarmed people if the intention wasn't to kick scouts out. So removing that collection of participation data, and I'm doing that particularly because, as I say, out of COVID, participation rates are potentially not necessarily reflective of longer trends. They're probably reflective of 2 years of being in a pandemic. So I'm just not sure that it's necessarily, it would be helpful.
I'll just ask for some quiet around the chamber. Thank you.
Helpful or accurate or really reflective data. The facility use, I'm not sure if that was, like if hours of use was perhaps more the intention there. So potentially, if that's really important to people, we could include review of all scout. I could move another amendment that has review of all scout halls, including something about their use rates. I think facility use has also perhaps spooked people, not quite sure what's intended by that. The facility asset condition is the review of the scout halls, so I think that's already captured. And then, as I say, the potential alternative uses for these assets is what's really, I think, worried people. So what I guess, speaking to the mover as well as colleagues, what I'm trying to do in this amendment is take out the bits that perhaps are concerning to people and perhaps have concerned people who've emailed me and I think other councillors today, and yet also tried to then progress the audit in a way that I hope captures, Councillor Nation, what your intention of your motion is.
Thank you, Councillor Isa. Councillor Hodgson.
Thanks, Mayor. Look, I seconded this for the purpose of debate. I think I will support it, but I am keen to hear if Councillor Nation is of a mind to speak to this amendment. It does alleviate some of the questions that I had coming into looking at this motion, including, as Councillor Rise has mentioned, the alternative uses, which I might have raised through a point of clarification to the mover of whether, ancillary also captures the intent there. And meaning, our community facilities, we do want to maximise their use, and if there are times of the day when halls aren't being used, perhaps other community groups could make use of them. But the other part of it that I had a question about was, and it's not quite clear to me, but perhaps with this wording, officers can work through with the scouts. The meaning is the facility asset condition, and it's that question of who owns these buildings. I think a lot of them are on council land, but often, or some are on scout-owned land. So I had a question mark over, whether even council officers would have the authority to sort of go and undertake a facility asset condition. So the removal of those words does give me some added comfort in supporting the motion and understanding the intent. But yes, I'd be keen to hear others' views.
Point of clarification, if I may, Mayor.
Thanks, Councillor Bedio.
Through to the CEO, and we agree this is a notice of motion, so there might not be information available to officers. But do we know whether the information that's being struck out in this amendment is being sought in the 2018 review?
Councillor Bedio, I'm very mindful that this is a notice of motion, so we probably don't have that information. I'm happy to refer to the CEO, who might tell you the exact same thing, but we'll let the CEO answer.
Thank you, Councillor Bedio. Through the Mayor. The Mayor is correct. I have not seen the review, so I cannot respond. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Bedio. And thanks, Councillor Hodgson. I believe you've finished your speech. Is that right? Yes. Okay, so we've had Councillor Isa speak on the amendment and Councillor Hodgson speak on the amendment. Would anybody else like to speak on the amendment? Councillor Nation.
Thank you, Mayor. So, look, I guess in principle, the striking out ultimately will get to the same point. I guess for me, the facility use and facility asset condition is more aligned to the fact in the two of the most recent master plans being AJ Davis and Clifton Park, where actually demolishing the scout facilities, dens, that are on council land but are a scout-owned building. So I guess in trying to flesh out what the audit may include, that particular facility use pertains to what their current, say for AJ Davis, what their current usage is in terms of dimensions needed for their activities, and then how that would translate to a multi-use pavilion at AJ Davis that's shared with the rugby club and the dog obedience club. So for me, that's things like the facility use and facility asset condition, important parts of the report to see how they actually use their facilities, but also the asset condition. So if the audit came back and said, look, at AJ Davis, that facility is on its last legs, it's got to get demolished anyway, then that would help guide the future delivery within that master plan. And those two in particular, look, participation data, it would be good to know. I think there's 8 troops, whether or not they're using all their buildings. They're their buildings, they're on council land, primarily, that's the setup. Some may be on overhold soon, some may have leases expiring, so it'd be good to understand what their needs are and what their uses are. If there's a particular area of our municipality or a particular high pickup. I think Airport West is really popular. You bought your Christmas tree from them on the weekend, Councillor Byrne. Good plug for the Scouts if anyone needs a Christmas tree. Going to the Airport West Scouts. So, I guess in principle striking it out, will we still get that data? Yes, but the inclusion there is not to go, hey, you're not using facility, or it's to gain information to help us deliver at AJ Davis, at Clifton Park, what's within the master plan, and that's the whole catalyst of why this notice of motion is here, because that hasn't been done. So, Councillor Hodgson, to answer your question, I don't know, because I still think those two pieces, they're two really important pieces of the puzzle.
Thank you, Councillor Nation. Would any other councillor like to speak on the amendment? Councillor Sypek.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Once again, I have to commend Council Nation for bringing this notice of motion up. And this is not an exercise where we're going to kick someone out or we're going to change them around.
Councillor Sypek, just to confirm, you're speaking on the amendment, not the substantive, because you will have a chance to speak on the substantive.
Okay, I'll reserve my speech for the substantive.
No
Thank
problems at all, Councillor Sypek. Would anybody else just like to speak on the amendment? Councillor Bedio.
I'm probably reluctant to take these points out because I think they do add a lot of value for us as decision makers. I think maybe the community or members of the community might be anxious at this, but I don't think it's any of our intentions to necessarily kick out Scouts from their properties. We collect this sort of information from all sorts of different sporting organisations. We've recently done it with soccer, we've done it with football in the past. If anything, it's to better our service delivery and to, well, the way I see it, get better data so that we can better support our community. So without knowing whether that specific information is included in the 2018 report, I'd be reluctant to strike it out at this point.
Thank you, Councillor Bedio. Would any other councillor like to speak on the amendment? Councillor Isa, would you like to close on the amendment?
It's good to understand more of the intent behind the data. I was hoping to have a chat with you over the weekend about it so we could perhaps work through my concerns, and I guess more so I really want to hear from the Scouts though, in terms of some of my nervousness here is that the Scouts haven't been consulted with respect to this motion and have emailed and said that they've not had an opportunity to discuss the review or how it be conducted, seek the opportunity to do so prior to any motions being passed. So I'm really trying to, I guess, address that concern by paring the motion back to some things that that perhaps take out some things that can be misunderstood until there is that, as the Scouts have asked for, an opportunity to discuss it. And it may well be that we could add another an additional point that says, and other information emerging from discussions with the Scouts, or and that, so another step in it that could then allow for the audit to be broadened, but in consultation with Scouts, so that there's some shared understanding about what data is being collected and why, and how it's being used, and which data, in fact, the Scouts can just hand over immediately, rather than council officers needing to go out and get the data. So there might be, with a discussion and a round table, that some of those points could be very easily addressed, but it would be done in a really collaborative way that then didn't make people feel as though council was sort of going off and doing things without talking to the people who would be most impacted like that. So if this amendment was to succeed, I would also then foreshadow an additional amendment that reflects what I've just said in terms of any other further information following some discussion with the Scouts.
Thank you,
Can I ask a point of clarification?
Yes, you can ask a point.
To the mover of the amendment, the particular part of your strikeout from "and will help" form, finishing with "as well as help," so that bit that's struck out,
Councillor Nation, what's your point of clarification?
I don't have one. I'm just trying to
Nation.
advise what I'd be supportive of.
Could I perhaps seek to adjourn the meeting for some clarification and yeah.
Hang on, we've got a,
Thank
we've
you.
got something on the table
Yes.
we have to vote on.
But
We
procedural
we
motions can be moved
still
at any time.
move.
So I'm moving a procedural motion just to adjourn the meeting for some clarification.
Councillor Isa, if you are moving to adjourn the moving to adjourn the meeting, is there a seconder for that motion? Councillor Nation. Do they get to speak on this? Straight to the vote. I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? That is Councillor Adams, Councillor Hodgson, Councillor Isa, Councillor Nation. All those against? That is Councillor Tyson, Councillor Sypek, Councillor Sharp, Councillor Byrne, Councillor Bedio. That is lost. I will put the amendment to the vote. All those in favour of the amendment? That is Councillor Tyson, Councillor Adams, Councillor Hodgson, Councillor Isa. All those against? Councillor Sypek, Councillor Sharp, Councillor Nation, Councillor Bedio, Councillor Byrne. That amendment is lost. I'm holding my breath. I can move back to the substantive.
Or another amendment could be
Or
moved.
another amendment may be moved. But if nobody is moving an amendment, I will...
I would really like to seek an adjournment again to consider another amendment to put forward. If I could move for an
If you're
adjournment
moving
to
for an
consider amendment.
adjournment, is there a seconder for that? Councillor Nation. I will put that to the vote. All those in favour? That is Councillor Tyson, Councillor Nation, Councillor Adams, Councillor Hodgson, Councillor Isa, Councillor Byrne. All those against? There's Councillor Sypek, Councillor Sharp, Councillor Bettio. We will adjourn for 5 minutes and we'll resume at 9:05. That motion's carried.
The procedure one.
welcome back to our council meeting. If you lost us a little bit there, we just adjourned the meeting for 5 minutes. We obviously need to ensure that we have the correct words on the screen and we know what is potentially happening with any amendments. So thank you for bearing with us for those 5 minutes. Now, Councillor Isa, you moved the adjournment, therefore you have right to speak as the first person. Now we are back.
That's a rule I've never used before. Thank you, Councillor. Thank you, Mayor. But I would like to speak to move another amendment, if I may.
Thank you, Councillor Isa.
The amendment, I'm going to read the entire motion, if that's perhaps the best way to do it, I think. The motion reads that Council resolves to receive a report back to Council in the first 6 months of 2022 that provides an audit of community facilities in Moonee Valley used primarily for scouts and guides, in brackets including cubs, venturers, etc., and then in consultation with scouts, full stop. The audit will include information related to participation data, facility use and facility asset condition, as well as help guide any future inclusion of Scout Guide facilities in Council master plans. As per the incomplete 2018 review, the audit will include a review of all Scout halls and work with Scouts to consider their needs moving forward.
Thank you, Councillor Isa. So just to confirm, the additions of in consultation with Scouts, the deletion of and will help form future planning and potential alternative uses for these assets, and the deletion of would and change to will is what your amendment is. Is that correct?
That's correct, Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Isa. So that is moved. Do I have a seconder for that amendment? Councillor Sharp. No. Just hold on. No, it's not Councillor Sharp. Councillor Adams. I'm thinking she didn't move or second. It is late. Councillor Adams. Apologies. Thank you. Councillor Isa.
Thanks, Mayor, and I won't speak too much. I'm wary that Councillor Tyson's keen to exercise more procedural motions, so I'll just say that, look, I'm really grateful for the discussions that we've had to try to reach that compromise. I really value working with colleagues in that way to try to make craft motions to make sure that they're respecting diversity of interests and appreciate the collegiate way in which we've been able to put together some words that I think address some concerns. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Isa. Councillor Adams. Thank you. Would any other councillor like to speak on the amendment? No. I will put the amendment to the vote. All those in favour? That is Councillor Tyson, Councillor Sypek, Councillor Nation, Councillor Adams, Councillor Hodgson, Councillor Isa. All those against? That's Councillor Sharp, Councillor Bedio, Councillor Byrne. That amendment is carried. So we are now back onto the substantive. Now, Councillor Isa, you had 1 minute on your substantive time to go.
I don't think anyone wants to hear me for the rest of the night. It's fine.
Thank you, Councillor Isa. Now, so we can go back to the substantive. I have Councillor Nation as the mover, Councillor Bedio as the seconder. Councillor Isa, you have also spoken. Nobody else has spoken thus far on the substantive. So would anybody else like to speak on the substantive? Councillor Sypek.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I think out there in TV land that are watching us right now, they probably have no idea what's just happened. So I just want to simplify this to the community. This is all about getting a report, consulting with the Scouts, consulting with the community, consulting with anyone that wants to have consultation. And then our officers will compile a report and bring it back to council. That's how simple this is. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Sypek. Would anybody else like to speak on this motion? Councillor Hodgson.
I'll keep it really brief, Mayor. Just to say, I too was a scout through Cub Scouts and Venturers. I love what the Scouts do, and I'm very supportive of working with them to make sure that their needs into the future are met. So I'm pretty comfortable with this. I thank you, Councillor Isa, for your amendment. Thank you, Councillor Nation, for bringing the motion. I wasn't aware of the 2018 review, but it will be good to see that completed with these few extra points to help guide officers' work on it.
Thank you, Councillor Hodgson. Would any other councillor like to speak on this motion? No. Councillor Isa, as the mover of an amendment, would you like to close? Councillor Nation, as the mover of an amendment, would you... no, just as the mover of the substantive, would you like to close?
Yes, thank you, Mayor, and I'm glad we've got to a compromised and position which ultimately puts the Scouts at the forefront, which is the intent of the motion, potentially not as well worded as it should have been. When I was rushing for notice of the motions to get them in before Pierce, so I'd be able to speak and make him wait until item 11.5. I'll give it just an example of why this review / audit is important. The other week we sat around, we endorsed the Queen Grove Precinct draft master plan, draft precinct plan. 2 stages. Stage 1 demolishes the Scout Hall. Now that might come as a surprise to the Scout groups listening, because it's a council land, it's a Scouts-owned building. In our Queen Grove Reserve Precinct Master Plan summary of consultation, the groups that were consulted were Basketball Victoria, Netball Victoria, Gymnastics Victoria, AFL Victoria, Cricket Victoria. The local groups that were consulted were Aberfeldy Jets Basketball Club, Essendon District Football League, Keilor Heights Primary School. No Scouts. So potentially we are creating these master plans, we're going in blind. In this case, in the draft master plan, it's only draft, so if the Scouts don't know about this, please get in touch before we move the actual master plan. We're demolishing a Scouts-owned building. There is a replacement building which is within the school hall, but that's in stage 2 of the Queen Grove master plan, so potentially there's a period between stage 1 and stage 2 where there is no Scout facility. That's why we need the review, that's why we need the audit, to ensure when we're delivering or when we're planning any master plan, be it big and small, we can ensure their needs are looked at, and that will secure their future that will secure their tenure in future within our city. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Nation. And I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? That is carried unanimously. Item 11.5, Councillor Nation, you've had your turn, so we now go to Councillor Tyson to present your notice of motion titled Notice of Motion number 2021/35 Canning Reserve Sporting Field Assessment.
Thank you, Mayor, and I promise I only have one. So I move that Council resolves to receive a report by March 2022 that assesses the potential for an additional sporting field to be established at Canning Reserve in Avondale Heights. The report should consider, but not be limited to, whether there is sufficient available open space to create a second sporting field, whether additional sporting codes could be supported on this site, estimated costs for development, and a high-level officer assessment of subsequent financial, environmental and amenity impacts at the site.
Thank you, Councillor Tyson. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Sypek. Councillor Tyson, would you like to speak to the motion?
Thank you, Mayor. And look, I'm really glad that Councillor Sypek supported this motion, because obviously he joined myself and yourself, Mayor, on the 4th of November down at the field to meet with Will and Bruno from the Sporting Club to talk about this proposal. I think what I really appreciated that we don't always see is a well thought through proposal. Something that they'd gone away, they'd consulted with their members and had a really good think about what could be, what should be done on the site. I know from their suggestions, from their looking into the proposal, I think a really key part of this is a second sporting field, unlocking that space, if environmentally and engineering permits it. But something that they were looking at, in addition to that, would be potentially new facilities, catering for the Riverview Retirement Village across the road, with maybe a bowls green, netball courts. Really, I think they put a lot of thought into this. I'm keen for us to look at it, whether it's possible, whether we can feasibly do it, and for what cost. And I really hope that colleagues support it. I think as well they have put a fair bit of thought into how they can unlock additional benefits for other codes. So I know that their junior team is currently sort of in conflict with a local soccer club, and in terms of their availability, and with a second field, they'd be able to provide that club with more space and more time. So I think they've really had a great think, and I'm keen for us to look into what's feasible and what we can do. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Tyson. Councillor Sypek.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I fully support this notice of motion by Councillor Tyson. Yes, the three of us were down there, and it's great to see when a fresh set of eyes comes into a new committee. And this is what we've got right now, Madam Mayor. We've got some fresh set of eyes, some younger guys moving into the place, and they're predominantly football and cricket, but they didn't look at it at just football and cricket. They've actually looked at it with other aspects, with other, stuff going around there. So Canning Street's never really had a proper master plan. There's been sort of half attempts to try and do something down there. 10 years ago we bored for water when we had the drought, and we found, brackish water down there, which worked as well. It's only been sort of looked at with cricket and soccer and football. So with their proposal, we're having a look at see whether we can expand, whether we can go better, bigger, and introduce different codes of sports down there would probably be a great revitalisation of that whole area down there. And you've got the Maribyrnong River. It's a beautiful place down there. If it's just maybe tweaked a little bit, you could probably get a lot more use out of it. So I have full confidence in our officers to have a look at this, come back to us with what they think is possible down there. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Sypek. Any other councillor? Councillor Adams.
Well said, Councillor Sypek. Down at Canning Reserve, it's such a massive parcel of land, isn't it? And it really is underutilised. I actually didn't even realise that there was only one oval down there. I thought there was more. I think I've been there a few times with footy matches and stuff with my kids, but I think if it is underutilised, it's a real shame, because it is a beautiful part of Avondale Heights. So totally support this and look forward to receiving the report back. Thanks.
Thanks, Councillor Adams. Any other councillor like to speak on this motion? Councillor Tyson, would you like to close?
Well, I think maybe going back for the last few motions, it's been a fine return to form for Councillor Nation after being derobed of the mayoral robes and chains.
Councillor Tyson, I'll ask for you to please stick to the motion. Thank you.
Sure, Mayor, and I was getting to that. But look, I really appreciate the work that Will and Bruno have done on this. I'm really keen to hear from their club members more. I understand they're meeting with them next week, and I'm really keen to see what comes back, I believe in March, I've said. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Tyson. And I will put that to the vote. All those in favour? That is carried unanimously. Okay, now the next item on the agenda is urgent business. Councillors, do we have any urgent business tonight? No? Okay. Moving right along then. And confidential reports, we don't have any on tonight's agenda, so therefore we are up to the close of the meeting. Thank you for everybody who tuned in online, and of course our first people back into the gallery since we've reopened. Thank you for watching and showing interest in what your council does. We will see you next time for our final meeting of the year. Bye. I declare this meeting closed.